Okay, good morning. Welcome to the work session, November 13th. At this time, what I'll do is turn it over to Mr. Martin.
I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Oh, I thought we did. Is it a formal one? I did, I just called it. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order.
Did you want to do all that
Oh, you
stuff?
want to do that? I thought that was the agenda for it.
I don't know, Mr. Evans. In fact, this is considered part of the meeting, so however you want to do it.
Okay, but at this time, after a brief moment of silence, Ms. Feathers will lead us into the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Even though the other night they mentioned the Veterans Day, and I know Mr. Martin's going to do that after a bit. Take a brief second here then to thank the veterans. I know Mr. McCrumb's here behind us, and I remember his service well. So we want to thank our veterans, and again, Mr. Martin will address that a bit later. Without further ado, Mr. Martin, I'll turn it over to the public works session because we have what we're doing.
Okay. Well, guys, first of all, thank everyone for being here today. Today's work session is scheduled for approximately 55 minutes from 9 a.m. to 9:55 a.m. Today's session is seeking input on math instruction and instructional practices and resources from select PHS math teachers. Mr. May, thank you for being here today. I know, Mr. Seymour, we're trying to make arrangements to get a couple of additional teachers over here. We're running into some coverage issues at the high school. Others here in attendance today, obviously, we have math instructional coaches, PHS administration, we have students, we have board members, we have members of the central office. The bulletin notes are just, again, trying to keep our thought processes and the meeting in an orderly fashion. So if we just maybe quickly introduce, there might be a few of you don't know some folks in the room, so let's just quickly introduce each other. So go here.
Hi, I'm Kristen Mankel.
I'm Lois Bowden.
Lucas Tatum.
Pam Feathers.
Bruce Huggins.
Christopher May.
Rebecca Hooker. Kelly Green. Brenda Layton.
Todd Seymour.
Katie Dunn.
Cross Kisner.
And Jennifer Brighton.
Okay, so just want to make sure for the record we had everyone announce who's here. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started, guys, in terms of just looking at a historical standardized testing performance as it relates to math over the last 9 years. Let's see if I can bring this up. So guys, in your packet, and I think, did everyone get a copy of the package? You should have got a larger packet that looks about like this, a yellow sheet, and then just a section from what I would call the agenda today. Everyone get a copy of that? Okay, so guys, what I want to start off with this, I was actually able to pull this from Zoom, West Virginia. This is basically our math, ELA, and science proficiency rates over the last 9 years since the 2014-2015 school year. I know that I came to the central office in 2013-14. I was the testing director that year, and that was the first year where we shifted from a traditional paper pencil test to an online testing platform. We don't have data from that first year. I wasn't readily able to pull that from Zoom, but just want to kind of walk you through. Obviously, today's focus is going to be upon math. I think a huge problem that we would all say, guys, is we've seen very low math performance and very stagnant math performance. I mean, if you look over the last 9 years, there hasn't been a lot of deviation. We've been, from a proficiency standpoint, as high as 17, as low as 9. That's not where any of us want our students to be. I'm sure everyone would be in agreement. We'd like to see higher levels of performance as it relates to math. Now, as we take a look at this, guys, the 2014-15 school years, okay, this would have been, again, this would have been a combination of scores that relates to math proficiency. Our 9th through 11th grade students would have been taking West Virginia. I don't even know if they called it this then. I can't remember. What we know as the general summative assessment at this point in time. 12th grade students were also assessed at that point in time with the Compass assessment. So those 2 years would have been a combination of proficiency levels between those two platforms, between those two testing assessments. Okay, from 2016 through our current rate, I believe, let me make sure I double check on that.
At the bottom it says 22, 23.
Well,
We
I'm just
started the
looking-
SAT in 2017, which would have been the
16,
16-17 school year.
All right, so your 16-17 school year, this is where we would have begun to, our proficiency rates would have been related to students who were assessed, only 11th grade students, and they would have been assessed using the SAT. So, that creates some of the problems when we're trying to compare our testing data over a sustained period. We've used different testing implements. We have assessed different grade level configurations of students. So it's hard to derive a ton from this other than the fact that we have not performed at a high level and we've had rather stagnant results over the last 9 years. Now, a couple other things to throw into the mix as well is ExactPath, which is going to be a point of discussion today. We started using ExactPath in the fall of 2020. So this, of course, is post-pandemic. So, basically, if you look at every district in the state of West Virginia and most around the nation, we saw significant declines in testing assessment. If you look from 18-19, and then we didn't test again until 2021. Of course, the 19-20 school year, we did not complete any standardized assessments as we had the COVID-19 pandemic kind of arise in the month of March. But we saw about a 5% decrease in proficiency. That's very consistent with what you would see in districts. Unfortunately, around the state, around the country, we saw a decline in those proficiency levels. Now, this is when we began to use ExactPath in the fall of 2020-21. There's a few other things that's mentioned here. It should be noted the current textbook resources were adopted, began use in the 2018-19 school year. So this is where we would have been moving to a more so with HMH, where we were predominantly the textbook resources were online for high school age students, whereas in previous years they would have had access to a physical textbook. A few other things we mentioned. In 2016, Preston County shifted math curriculum back to a traditional math pathway. Prior to 2016, for a brief period of time, we were incorporating Math 1, Math 2, Math 3 versus the traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2 models that we've become more accustomed to. Overall, changes in assessments, grade levels tested, instructional resources, and curricular configuration have contributed to stagnant performance. But they do kind of make these results somewhat, it's hard to derive a ton from these, but I know one thing that we wanted to look at is you can't really know where you're going until you see where you've been. So as a matter of these are, again, our testing scores over the last 9 years. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Layton, if you want to kind of walk us through kind of the historical reasoning as to where we came to begin using ExactPath.
Sure. Looking at this timeline, back at the beginning of that, I was at Preston High School as an assistant principal, and I was the testing coordinator at that time. So I came from that perspective and to the county office about a year after we switched to the SAT, maybe 2. I know I did 1 year at least of the SAT as far as coordinating. So when I came to the county office and we're looking at the SAT, and we were really, even then we're having these same discussions we're having now. Why is our math low? What can we do about it? And this is kind of what we came up with at that time, and this is what's been guiding everything we've been doing ever since. So we needed consistency across classrooms and shared responsibility for student success. We were seeing a lot of classrooms that, whether they were successful or not, there was a kind of a closed door mentality. What stays in here happens in here, it's my room, it's my world, and that's just kind of a natural thing, I think, for people to do. But we needed to start communicating and sharing across the classrooms. When we switched to the SAT, we realized really quickly that waiting until the end of 11th grade was too long to find out whether our students were having success or not. And so we couldn't wait from their 8th grade GSA scores until the 11th grade to see where they were. And so we had to have some measure to figure out what was happening in those years between and leading up to that SAT. We also wanted to focus in on what's actually happening in our classrooms and the instruction that was going on there. And we discovered that we had students coming to the high school with very low skills. They were missing skill gaps from some way back in elementary school, middle school, which made it hard for them to jump into the grade level material. And then we also looked at what instructional materials we had and were available. So those were our 5 kind of things, so everything else is kind of going off of those. So to start addressing the consistency across classrooms, we looked at what's called PLC, personal learning communities, personalized learning communities. And we started in the summer of 2021. We had a book study with a book called PLC Plus. We spent that whole summer with our principals because in order to have strong professional learning communities, I said several different things for that P, but it is professional, not personalized. Professional learning communities, we had to have principals that understood what they were and how to lead them. And so we wanted to really educate our principals around professional learning communities. And basically that is a time for teachers to get together in small groups and really look at instruction, what's happening in their classrooms, what's working, what's not working, where students' skill levels are, and all of those things that help us grow instructionally. So we spent that time with our principals that summer. And then the next year, we really focused in on the PLC leadership of our principals. We looked at what their PLC schedules were. We talked about what was happening in those PLCs to really get them kicked off. And some schools jumped right into it. Others took a little longer. But even today, that's still something that we are focusing on and continuing the process of. Because if you don't have that time to communicate, we're not all on the same page. Then we jumped in, of course, with our department meetings and cohort meetings. And some of this was a little more K-8 than the high school, but we had that time set aside from the whole county where all 3rd grade teachers get together, all 5th grade teachers get together. And then for our middle and high school, we would get the groups 6 to 12 together so they could work on some longitudinal kind of like goals from what a 6th grader should know to be ready for 7th grade, to be ready for 8th grade, 9th grade, and so on. So that's some of the time we spent. And then that kind of led into our RCD development, which was the units that keep all teachers kind of on a pacing guide and have common focus on standards at the same time. So that's kind of how that went to get the consistency across the classrooms. When it comes to student progress, we knew we needed a benchmark tool. And at that time, the state was requiring a benchmark tool. Through all of our different, I can't even remember the year that was. I don't know, Brad, if you remember, but when they were required a benchmark tool because they were counting not only a final target point, but they were also counting a growth target point. And so we were looking at what different benchmark tools were out. We started with a program called STAR, which was run by Renaissance. And STAR was a nice program, and it was just that, a benchmark tool. It was a tool for the kids. They took it at the beginning. It gave the teachers reports that said, you know, these 5 kids really are struggling here, these 5 kids, and it would group the kids into small groups, which then allowed the teacher to focus in on kids that really needed those specific skills. And that test went all the way to 12th grade. A couple years into STAR, though, we were hearing all these counties around us that were having major success with a program called iReady. And what iReady did was iReady took it the next step. So you have a test that tells you where the kids are, but as a teacher, I'm only one person. I can only hit so many skill gaps in so many different kids in so many different places at one time. So iReady started the trend of, not trend, but the movement, I guess, to have the skill deficiency like platform. So now we have kids, the teachers can still get their reports, we can still see who's on track, the teachers can still use that to group for their small group instruction, but when they're not working directly with the teacher, now they have a platform to go to work on their own personalized skill development. So we're hitting the skills in multiple different ways to try to get every kid onto grade level. So we bought this program, and they gave us a lot of promises at the beginning that it would go to the high school. And it does for the test. The diagnostic test of iReady goes all the way to 12th grade. But the learning platform does not. It only goes to 8th grade. And we tried the first year to use it so we bought this program, and they gave us a lot of promises at the beginning that it would go to high school. And it does for the test. The diagnostic test of iReady goes all the way to 12th grade. But the learning platform does not. It only goes to 8th grade. And we tried the first year to use it for students that were significantly behind. Some of our special ed students, but any student really, we were targeting students that maybe had skill levels from middle school they were still missing. And the immediate complaint from both teachers and students was, this is too young, it's too baby-fied, it's cartoony, this is not meant for high school students. So we went looking for another program. We went looking for a program that was specifically designed for high school students, and there weren't a lot out there. And that just happened to be when we came across Edmentum. They've been at some of our WVASA meetings. They also just stopped by, we got to know them, and they had a similar product to iReady that was not designed just for high school students. So that was kind of how we got to Edmentum. It was a evolution there. So that was that piece of it. So now we had a tool to mark student progress. Then we need to look at what's going on in our classrooms. So we spent a lot of time working with our administrators on walkthroughs, really looking at the principal as the instructional leader of the building. Principals have a lot on their plates. They have a lot of fires to put out. They have a lot of things. But if instruction was going to change in a building, there was no one else that can really impact that aside from the school principal. So we put in a focus on walkthroughs. We put in some requirements on how many they had to do and when they had to do them. And then we even bought a tool called WeClimb, which allows the principals to design their own form so they can pick the things they're looking for specifically and then gather data from their classrooms as they're walking through. So we did that in the fall of 2022. And then we continued to work with our principals to be leaders in those PLCs that I mentioned before. And then in 2021, we started data talks. That came from the state as a requirement for superintendents that they had to have quarterly data talks with their principals, but it ended up being a really fantastic tool. We still do it today. We did some in October. We've got some coming up again in December. The county office team goes and sits down with the leadership team, principals, and whoever they bring to the meeting to talk about where they are and where they're headed. We talk about the walkthrough data. We talk about RCD data. We talk about PLCs. We talk about Edmentum and iReady and all of the things that we're doing, what they're targeting, what they're seeing in classrooms, and it keeps everybody kind of on a focus together. So they're really little PLCs for our county office and schools together. So then we get down to the missing skills. And I'm going to kind of jump ahead because one of the reasons, and I'll come back to this, that our teachers were saying at the high school that they did not like the new books is the rigor was too high. That I even had a teacher say to me one time, the students at the end of Algebra 1 are not ready for page 1 of the book, which is not where we need our kids to be. So why? Why aren't they ready? So that was where we were going. So that's when we were looking at shifting the instruction to really focus in on the individual. Exact Path was part of that. We have a lot of classrooms at the high school that I know Kelly can talk about that have moved to a small group instruction model where they're actually working with groups of kids and while other kids are doing independent activities. Differentiated instruction and then formative assessments, small little assessments in the classroom on a daily basis to see where the kids are to know, do I need to reteach that? Do I need to go back? Do I move on? Those kinds of things. So Exact Path, I think, I know there's a lot we're going to talk about with Exact Path, but Exact Path is a tool. Exact Path is a tool for teachers to help students fill in skill gaps. One teacher cannot teach every single kid at every single skill level that kid is in their classroom. It's just physically impossible. And it was one way that we looked at to try to improve what was happening in our classrooms. And it was a tool purchased for and by the request of the leadership teams and the teachers of the school. So that's Exact Path. And then lastly, looking at instructional materials. I know there's a lot of contention about the last math adoption. I was not part of that. We can't do anything about that. We're starting a new one, so we're going to move forward with that. But at the time the digital adoption was made, two things were happening. Number one, there were books everywhere at the high school. There were Algebra 1 books filling lockers by the hundreds all over the school. There were books that were there that were physical books. And at the time, the instructional team, and I was not on it, but made the decision that we have so many books, we need different kinds of materials. Digital was trending and digital was way less expensive. Our budget at the time was really tight. It was before our levy kicked in. It was before we had any kind of ESSER or COVID money. And so the digital was much less expensive. Plus we were in the midst of moving to a one-to-one student device. So all of that played into why that decision was made at that time. To kind of help with that, we bought the Big Fat Notebooks because we heard that students wanted more tangible, hands-on kind of things. So we've given them those to get through in the meantime. Plus, like I said, all of those books are still there. So teachers are using different resources based on the standards that they're supposed to be teaching. So now we're looking at this new textbook, though, we need to decide. First of all, I think that they've changed the way they offer textbooks. I know they have. So I think that it's very feasible for us to look at an adoption that's both digital and paper-based. We did that for the last two adoptions. The ELA was a paper-based plus digital. The science was an ELA plus, or was a paper-based plus digital. So I think it only makes sense that our math adoption will be as well. But when we're looking at that, we want to look at other things. Is there any textbooks out there that have a built-in diagnostic platform, that have a built-in student tracker, that have a built-in skill gap filler. I don't know, and that's just some of the questions we'll be asking as we're moving forward, because we still need a tool to do those things. We still need a tool to track our student progress. We still need a tool to help students fill in the gaps that they're missing. And if ExactPath isn't the tool, then what is that right tool? So that's just part of the evaluations that we're going to keep in our discussions as we move on. Yep, you're welcome.
One more, if you want to just briefly discuss how the reasoning from PHS administrative and leadership the initial use of ExactPath.
So when the leadership and curriculum team got together and met about, where we're at with iReady, what do we want to do, the possibility of ExactPath coming into play here, we were using iReady, but, we felt that since it only had learning paths that really went up to 8th grade, we felt we needed something that would help with Algebra 1 and Geometry and Algebra 2 especially. Neither iReady nor ExactPath really helps the top 5% of our students. Let's face it. They test out of ExactPath, they would test out of iReady. They don't have learning paths for those students. So when we're talking about who are we targeting with these learning paths, we're not targeting the top 5% of our students. We're targeting the 92%, the 91% that aren't being proficient. And ExactPath provides a diagnostic, develops the learning paths, which can be customized by teachers. I know this might come as a shock, but sometimes students don't do their best on these tests. And then they might get, a 3rd grade level, but the teacher sitting there knows that they're not at a 3rd grade level. Well, the teacher can adjust that learning path. So that's the advantage there. They can adjust the learning path to where they believe the student really is, as they've been assessing as they're going in class. Those teachers who use ExactPath with fidelity see growth. That's in your board members, that's in your packet for the board meeting, not these. It's digital. But let me just say this. Are we using ExactPath to its full potential? No. We're still trying to work on implementing it. But if you see those teachers, some teachers who are very vocal in ExactPath saw negative growth the last 2 years. You want to know why? Because they don't do it. They don't do ExactPath. In fact, one saw negative 37% growth, or scale score growth. So something's wrong there. Contrast that to another teacher who in 2022 didn't really use the program, saw a minor negative growth, but then last year when they used the program, saw positive growth. And they grew over a year. So when they're using it with fidelity, ExactPath is working. If we continue with ExactPath as our measuring tool and gap filler, we're going to take a close look at how we use it and what additional tweaks we can make moving forward. I mean, we've made a bunch of tweaks over the last 2 years, and we're going to continue to do that. But as Brenda said, we're not married to it. If there's something out there that we find that we feel can help and do a better job, I mean, we'd rather go with that. So that's kind of where we're at with ExactPath, and that's how the leadership team and the curriculum team came to the conclusion back then to switch from iReady to ExactPath.
Ms. Berger, if you want to talk about some of your work, teaching staff, PHS with the professional learning community.
So, in May 2022, I believe, I was still working at another school, but came in to do data analysis with the teachers. And we organized, I can pass these around. These are the analysis sheets that I brought, and we were working together with both math and ELA. And it was asking teachers to look at number of students tested, number of students below level, number of students approaching level, number of students meeting or exceeding the levels by class. And it hit me during this time, because I was working with teachers who had, they were used to the process. But through PHS, it really threw them for a loop, looking at the data, looking at the differences. And so when I became an administrator for Preston High the next year, I realized that data analysis was a weakness. We were teaching content to students, but looking at their outcomes and their pre versus post was something new. So that's where we started. I also knew that the previous year they had tried the PLCs on an extended day, where they had taken 15 minutes, I believe, from the end of each day and then added it to the end of one single day. I believe it was Thursday that year. And the attendance was maybe 3 members of the team for the PLCs. So the investment as a team was something that I wanted to work on. And that was my main focus going into that school year, was getting everybody to work as a team, to have conversations built around math learning, built around student data. Are we getting the learning that we wanted or that we had intended? And so we came into PLCs. It was right at the end of the school day. We had maybe 30 minutes. So it would focus on where are our students, what are our weaknesses, how are we instructing, and getting people to just sit and talk. Now, a PLC, I led them, but they are intended to be teacher-led. There should be a facilitator that is a teacher that is leading these discussions, and then a secretary and a timekeeper to keep everybody on track so that everybody's accountable to each other and becomes a community. Just getting people into the room, I as an administrator had to start that. And this year, we're finally getting to the point that I have a math teacher leading the conversations. I was sick this last week, and they held the PLC without me and had discussions based around student learning and based around where they needed to go and what resources they needed. A lot of the conversation, if we're talking, a big part of this is going to be exact path. During our PLCs, exact path is not our focus. We have used exact path and looked at the data after benchmarks, because that's why you take the data. You take the data to analyze it, to look for student weaknesses, to guide your instruction. But we didn't spend every PLC looking at student data. This next one, my teachers are just now finishing their Unit 1s and Unit 2 assessments. So this next PLC will be looking at Unit 1 and 2 pre and post test on their classroom assessments. How did students do 1 to 2? Did they get the growth that they were looking for? Are students reaching proficiency? A lot of times, I will bring the data to a PLC. Last year I did. We looked at how the Edmonton proficiency can help us, which pieces. We discovered that we liked quantile better because scale score was harder to understand, it was harder to equate to a learning area. We looked at the lowest performing grade level that it gives us and what that means. They are empowered to switch student learning paths. They can move them up if they would like, or if they feel like a student didn't perform as well. So it's a work in progress. This year, so last year was focusing on getting everybody together in a team. This year, we are focusing on using our classroom instruction to the best of its ability. My walkthroughs last year, I noticed that not only were we using Edmentum, but we're also remediating a lot. So I had classrooms that it was middle of the year and they were teaching the previous grade level's content still. So my Algebra 1 felt like they had to remediate 8th grade math for a quarter of the year, half the year. My Algebra 2 felt like they had to remediate Algebra 1 because Algebra 1 didn't get for half the year, so they didn't get to all the Algebra 2 content. There's this practice called just-in-time remediation. You remediate as it's applicable to what you're teaching. So teaching a unit at the beginning of the school year is the kids are going to forget the content because it's not applicable at the time. So we are looking at how to structure our instruction during our period, no matter how much time we're given, to get the best bang for our buck. We're not lecturing because lecturing has a low outcome as far as learning amount. We use visible learning, we use rate of learning. But what's called gradual release model, which is I do, you do, we do, or I do, we do, you do. So I teach for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we practice it together with my feedback. That's a big important piece, is the feedback. And then you do by yourself or in a small group to practice this before going to homework. We're talking about that, and that's this year's goal, is how do we structure instruction to get the biggest bang for our buck. Edmentum is a piece of that, but curriculum is also a piece. Our pre and post tests are a piece. Our rigor level of our instruction and making sure we're teaching grade level content standards is a big piece of that, so that we're not spending a lot of time remediating the previous grade level and getting to the content we're supposed to teach.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Murray, you want to talk about some of your work that you've done with the staff and recommendation specific to math?
Yeah, so last year we decided really to start focusing on 8th and 9th grade as far as math, looking at where our kids need to be. The reality is, for the high school, everything they do in math comes back to expressions, equations, functions, all those fundamental pieces. So my work at the high school last year was focused on the 9th grade teachers. For the most part, we did a lot with the 9th grade classrooms, working on formative assessment, working on seeing where those gaps were, because that idea of let's teach unit 0 for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and try to shove all of middle school into the beginning of the year is not effective. We really looked at using those pre-assessments, which we've now transitioned into being SAT format questions for the entire high school within the RCD framework. We looked at using those formative assessments, building in some kind of activity-based formative assessments and saying, you know, what do our kids need to know right now? What prerequisite skills do they need for this unit to be successful? 9th grade classrooms last year, by the end of the year, every 9th grade classroom at PHS was doing small group instruction. A lot of that time, Exact Path was being used, you know, during that small group time. So teachers were pulling small groups and using Exact Path as one of the things kids were doing. During that time, they were also doing activities, they were doing cooperative learning, which are a lot of the things we focused on with our 9th grade teachers. Last year, we did start working with our Algebra 2 teachers with coaching at the end of the year, and really started targeting some of those, what are the gaps preventing our kids from being successful with SAT? Part of that was content ability coming in, part of that was the test taking. We started looking at ways to, again, really fill those gaps, but also say, what are we doing in our classroom that we can target? So we went back and we gave them a pre-assessment on Algebra 1 skills. Here we go, here's targets. We looked at the skill assessments that we got from the diagnostic from Exact Path and said, what specifically can they do that's preventing them from being able to do this? We pulled targeted lessons from Exact Path, which is a component of Edmentum that we haven't really talked about today. We went back and pulled targeted lessons for that teacher, and that teacher did have substantial growth between their second and third diagnostic at that time, because we looked at targeted lessons for them. So that was a lot of the things we focused on last year. This year, we do have small group instruction that I've been working with our teachers. Right now, I'm in 4 coaching cycles in math at the high school, and I have 2 more scheduled. I just have them, I haven't got to them yet because I can only be so many places at once and be effective. I'm scheduled through February at this point, which is good. Again, focus has been formative assessment, the small group structures, a lot of active engagement. Right now, we're working on cooperative learning structures with our students. We're starting to work on how the kids work together, because when you're pulling a small group, you know, what are the rest of the kids doing? So giving kids those sentence starters of how do they have academic discourse? So we're taking those teachers who are comfortable with it, which are very lucky to have several that are really getting it and having this great format and great structure in their room, and taking it to the next level for them. And then we have 2 more that have reached out and said, you know, it's time to go big or go home. We want to do what they're doing in their classrooms. So things are definitely changing as far as what they're wanting to do in classrooms. They are They are reaching out faster than I can get to them, which is a very good thing. And we're looking at that. How do we build the skills? How do we make sure the kids are getting individualized pieces? How do we integrate those SAT questions into the classroom, into bell ringers, into the tests that we're giving anyway? How do we build those pieces? But just how do we make sure that we're using that time, like Becky said, the most effectively? But when we go to those PLC meetings, you know, they're now having those conversations of, I tried this, you should come watch me. And there's nothing more exciting than seeing an email from a teacher, because like you said, it's my room, my world. There's nothing more exciting than seeing an email that says, hey, I'm gonna do this today. If anybody wants to come watch, come watch. That's so cool. That's so cool to see from our perspective, because they're learning from each other and they're sharing from each other. So that's a really positive thing from our end.
And we've spent a lot of money and just invested a lot in materials.
Yes.
To do a lot of hands-on for the small groups, manipulatives and just activities for those to really take it out of just talk.
Yes, and those activities, we really looked at the diagnostic specifically and said, these are our weaknesses. So we're using that diagnostic data to say, these are specifically the skills our kids need that are preventing them from being successful. So we went back and found games that they can do while the teacher's pulling a group. We found resources that the teachers can use while they're pulling small groups, but a lot of just hands-on things, a lot of things that make it more tangible, because we do have those kids that are, you know, I tell him all the time, like, I get that he can look at a geometry problem and it just makes sense, but I was not that person. I was the person that when I built my house, I was out there with like 2x4s, like going, okay, lay it out for me. How big is my kitchen gonna be? I need to walk around in it, because I'm not a spatial person. So we're finding those tools to get in kids' hands from the middle school up. But I don't care how old they are, they need the hands-on tools. So we're looking at the diagnostic, we're looking at the specific gaps from those pre and post tests and finding the right resources, the right hands-on tools. And we've got the right staff to do it. We just need to get them the resources and the right strategies to be successful, because they're wonderful.
Thank you. Well, it's other being wonderful, we have a couple of teachers with us today, so Mrs. Malley and Mr. May. And I know you guys have to find out enough time to be here, we have to find out enough time left today. And we're going to double back to you guys, what we want to hear from our students in terms of some of the program work they've done. Mr. May or Mrs. Malley, anything that you can speak to in terms of what are your biggest challenges in terms of math instruction for PHS? What are some things that we as a central office or board can do to support your work? Anything you can come speak to that?
You want me to go first?
Sure. You always have something to say.
I always. I open my mouth too much sometimes. So I think one of the biggest things that has been a struggle with math at the high school has been the time frame. And we've been working on this for quite some time, trying to get a schedule that works. I don't hate the 43-minute schedule that we have now, mostly because I've done a lot of work to put what I do as a class into that framework to make it fit, and I think it works decently well with that time frame. Running into problems, although with the planning time, it's very hard to get everything you need done in that span of 43 minutes of a planning period. I'm kind of fortunate in the aspect that I have a little bit extra time since I have a duty, so it gives me about 10, 15 extra minutes on the day that I can do stuff if I skip out on my lunch a little bit. But it's very difficult to get some of those things taken care of. And speaking on things like exact path, it's like exact path could be great if you have the time to sit and personalize it for every student. But if you are, it's hard to find the moments to really go in and analyze the students effectively enough to gauge where they're at. And it's a lot of hit or miss that I do with my students in the classroom, where I'll be like, okay, you think this lesson's too easy, finish it and try the next one. If the next one's too easy, then maybe we need to bump it up a little bit. But I usually don't bump it up more than maybe a lesson or two, just because it's so hard to kind of gauge where they should be at based on that, just from the brief interactions that I get. Because with 110 kids, I get maybe a couple minutes with them each week, if that.
Chris, with the change in the classes, have you noticed a difference in terms of engagement level with the students? Or, I mean, I guess it's a little less time to keep on task with that. What's been the experience?
I mean, less time means more engagement, most likely, because there's less time to fool around, there's less success in the class. We have a pretty busy schedule with how the classes are set up right now, at least in my room, where they're working pretty much from the beginning moment they get in, minus a couple little chit-chat minutes that I set aside for relationships with them. But they're working pretty much from the time they get in to the time they leave, with only a couple minor exceptions being those exceptional students that just breeze through the lessons very quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Allen, would you like to add?
I see a lot of the same challenges, especially last year, coming from an 80-minute block at the middle school. I had to adjust a lot of things I was doing, coming from 80 minutes to 43. And one of those things that I unfortunately don't get to do as much as I want to is small group. Last year with 80 minutes, I was able to do small group instruction every day. And that helps with a lot of behavior issues because the kids were getting to spend more one-on-one time with me. And Kelly can speak to this, they loved that small group time with me. They knew, okay, it's just Miss Nally and the three of us, and she's gonna help you work on this, and it's more individualized help. So unfortunately with like a block essentially cut in half, I'm not getting to do small groups every day. I'm lucky if I get to do it twice a week, which is what I've been averaging. And like with planning, I'm planning for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 in 43 minutes a day. So it's hard to be able to, get all my stuff prepared and be able to effectively give kids feedback on formative assessments. Kelly and I have come up with a really good strategy for my Algebra 1 kids. And I brought some samples, I crossed out their names, but last week, speaking of exact math, one of the days on Thursday I was pulling small groups. So while I was pulling small groups, I had them working on exact math. And at the end of the period, before they turned this in to me, since there was no school on Friday, I had them tell me the number of trophies. I had them rate their effort on getting exact math done, and then I had them tell me why they rated themselves. So I can pass those around if you want to look at what a few of the kids said. I flapped their names out.
Were you at the middle school last year, 80 minutes?
At least, yeah.
Okay, because I didn't, just curious.
And those were all the ones I was able to get blacked down.
While we're looking at those, so the way that I hear past is kid takes diagnostic, computer algorithm says they pass this, this, and this, computer algorithm says this is their deficiency, computer algorithm says this is where they need to focus on, computer algorithm chooses which lessons they're gonna take. But you said it takes a lot of time to set up per pupil, per teacher, so that's what I understood. I should say what you said.
Well,
Can I get some clarity there?
Well, yeah, and in a perfect world where they take those diagnostics, that would not be an issue, right? The diagnostics should automatically put them into a closed area. The problem we with a lot of our students is they've lost a lot of faith in the program. So what they'll do is they'll go into the diagnostic and we'll see students that finish in 10 minutes. A 40-question diagnostic in 10 minutes is unfeasible by any standard. I don't care if you're Usain Bolt of math, you are not finishing a diagnostic in that fast time. So they come in and they'll be like on a kindergarten level, adding, subtracting like positive numbers. And I look at that and I think for a high school student, there's no high school student that's on that skill. Absolutely not. And if there is a high school student that's on that skill, they're not going to need to go over it because they're just going to punch it in the calculator at this point. They're not going to go back and set that up very easily. They're going to plug it in because they have that access. So really what we're running into is the ones that take it seriously are shooting off the end of the map and they don't have anything to do because they aced it. The rest of them that are not taking it seriously are being flung like bullets onto a dartboard and just hitting random locations that we then have to go back and adjust. I had one kid last year that ended up being one of the highest growths in the school, not because of anything I did, but because he tanked his first diagnostic so bad that he was on like a kindergarten level. And by the time we worked with him for the end of the year, he went up like 200 points. just because I encouraged him to do it and he was actually trying his best.
It's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think what Mr. May is saying, the questions that Cross is asking is probably what my assessment of iReady and Exact Path is that students are not widgets. Like, right, for me, all marigolds are the same. If they're deficient in one type of mineral, I can give it a fertilizer and it'll work. But students have to emotionally want to do it, and they have to really motivate themselves. And from my understanding of it, Exact Path or Edmentum was designed for virtual students, students that purposely chose to, well, you're shaking your head no, but that's what I understood, that Edmentum was approved for virtual, as a virtual platform originally. So those are
That's
students-
a different part of Edmentum.
Right.
So there's different features. So what you're talking about is the actual, what's called courseware, and that is a virtual platform for instruction. That's a totally different product than Exact Path. There's multiple pieces
But
of.
I meant, the point being is, from what I read, going back to the 5 years when Word Boxes, Edmentum was approved as a virtual school platform.
Right, but that's a different Edmentum program. That's Edmentum courseware, not Edmentum Exact Path. It is confusing, but they're totally different products.
Okay, but then that would, in my mindset, that would be well suited for students that are personally choosing to be virtual, so they have to self-motivate because they're not in the classroom. But in a classroom setting, like, what I'm agreeing and understanding what you're saying is you have 30 different students testing at different levels, how would you be able to go in and instruct?
Well, and the flip side of that though is if we don't have a program like Edmentum Exact Path, then like as a teacher, then he has to meet every one of those individual skill gaps. Like it's designed to help so that there's something that's working in the background along with the teacher so that they are not, because they can't do it in 43 minutes with 150 kids. You just can't. So if it's working well, it should be helping the teacher.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I think the points John here.
Yeah.
Just one comment before we get into what Mr. Catham said. My understanding is people can like take their advanced classes online, because I had a friend or whatever, he takes it online. He takes a class online, he took out something online, I'm not sure, doing it. And he told me that it was the exact same setup as an exact.
I took 3 classes.
So, I mean, like, it's the same.
With Edmentum and the way they structure their
Then-
learning, the instruction for the online classes, and the way they do it with Edmentum is the exact same structure. And I don't think that's suitable for kids who don't choose that.
And
But back to survey. So we had a survey put out last week on Wednesday, Tuesday night. And our questions, you can see in your packets there.
one more.
On the last page here, in fact, we were from our new one. And our first one, we don't put, there's 190 policies, it was pretty piece of paper. Or what are your current math English ones, we looked through, and we had everywhere from freshman remedial to AP Stats senior year. So we got a pretty solid overview of every type of student. So one of our first things were what class we do. Exact Path, we had a myriad of responses, as you can see, and the most being they're doing that in every single class. And so I put in the bottom kind of talking points of what we learned from this is that students will have a general rule for Exact Path. It's not being implemented. It may be in theory, it may be sitting on their like some kind of plan. We're doing this X number of days a week or X number of minutes, but it is not actually being done, at least in the student point of view. That we don't feel as if we're getting the same information if we're doing the same places. And we can also look at, if we look at the graph next page, if you add it up, 302 responses were for math and 252 for English overall, so for math. And the majority of assigned time is on math, but that's also backed up. In this packet, we can see that we have time and learning path for mathematics is 64 days compared to language arts and reading combined is 31. So why are math scores still the main problem if the Exact Path is being mainly focused on math? So either that's assume everything seriously, it's boring, it's not fun, it's not a good tool, it's being randomized, you don't know, but I think that's what we look at. Is it my biggest problem is math, and then our tool or program is still focusing mainly on math, and we're still not improving. If anything, we've gone down within stack. So that's something I think we should look at when we're talking about when we're going to keep it up. So then we go next, how many minutes are assigned to your faculty. Each time we have
about equal for 30 plus, 15 to 25, there are a few that say none, or really only 15 minutes per week. I have 7 times 45 minutes, because when I asked teachers and students, they thought it was 45 minutes. It apparently it's only 20 now, and it's supposed to be on Tuesdays, is what's on missing, so.
No, it's 40 minutes.
It's 40 minutes, it is 40, not 45. Okay, so it's around 40 minutes. But so teachers and students are so lucky, they're not really students aren't. And if teachers are assigning full amount of time, are students expected to fill in that gap at home? Does this leave an adequate time for their coursework at home? And once again, the expectations of students are not uniform across grade levels, across classes, and that also runs into a problem where we're speaking to each other. And I hear my friend only has to do 10 minutes a week, and I have to do 30. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense, that's not fair. I don't want to be doing this for 30 minutes, I'm just doing 10. And once again, it brings that expectation lower and lower within the student body. And then we have how many minutes per week. What's interesting about this, we have 83 saying that they're assigned 30 minutes, and then only 46 saying they complete those 30 minutes. So even if they're being assigned a high number, they're not even completing that. And is that, how can we fix that? Is there a way, is there a discipline for that? I'm not sure. And also the biggest response, most common was 15 to 25 minutes. And is that an effective amount of time to learn new skills, and not only learn but master these skills enough to apply them in a standardized testing environment? Because it is wonderful when kids can say, I mastered this skill, I know how to do it. When we put them on that SAT, which are end diagnostic, in an X amount of time, you get nervous. You get nervous, you're like, oh no, I will, I forget, and then move on. So I'm wondering if 15 to 25 minutes is enough time to master them enough to feel confident to implement that in an environment where it isn't, I have a teacher right there, I have a calculator, I have Google. And then kind of into opinions, you think exact has helped in specifically your math class. We have 117 responses that say just no. We have 32 responses that said that a negative effect on my learning, and printed out if you guys want copies of that. We have those report numbers, we can make copies of, we have student-based responses, we give opinions, and we have some as big as paragraphs. So kids did take this seriously on the thing, and one of the biggest things we had was, it doesn't leave enough time for coursework. So, there's that. And we only have 3 responses saying it does help. So basically, students have an overwhelmingly negative view of exact path. They don't feel like they're learning. Some students feel as though they're learning has been distracted from. Can this be remedied while still retaining exact path? That would be the most important question we have to think about. And if we could exact path, what would that look like? We need to have a set plan because we've been changing up how we exact plan. I think the path we're on from what I've heard today is very helpful and useful. But if we are already implementing that, the students do not feel that change. They are not seeing that, they're not feeling that, they're very clearly being exact out of the same as it was when we just used the diagnostic. I just don't know what to start. And then we have English, which is a little bit better. We have 109 positive no, we have 39 neutral, we have 26 a little bit, and we still have some responses saying it kind of like and then if you go down to, do you feel that exactly isn't taken seriously by your peers and teachers? We have once again, not really, not at all. We have like sort of in neutral, we have 15 saying definitely. So there is a slightly better response that they do think it's being taken seriously, but it's still not being, it's not very helpful. So why don't they take it seriously? Can this be remedied at all? And even when switching to a different diagnostic platform, the question is, if not exact path, then what? So can we go to the, how can we still make it that people take online is diagnostic, exact pathway type program seriously? And that's something that we need to be looked at across from administrators down and students on. So those are our things. I think we're supposed to start. Sorry, it's like speed run.
I know, you have very little time.
That, but that's kind of our main things. And if people want some of the student-based responses, we can make copies of implement to that extra.
Can I add something really quickly? Talking to my students, just, not something that's formal, but just talking with them in passing and talking with the other math teachers. A lot of us, teachers and students, are feeling like there's no incentive to do exact path and there's no consequence if you don't.
Yeah, that's why I added like, is there a way to, there's a kind of thing where it's like a consequence if you don't do it, but there's also a problem we ran into, as I said, you can see one of the main things, we don't have enough time for coursework, the computer isn't helping me, I get stressed out, because they already have stressed. If we already have a thing where I'm going to get a 0 if I don't do this homework, if we have an extra, I'm going to get another 0 if I don't do this online thing, you're just setting things up to fail. Like, we're already saying,
That's why we don't grade it.
yeah, we don't, but if we don't grade it, then kids don't do it. There's also that problem. So we're running into, should we just put more
But
time?
that's a life skill these kids have to learn, because
But
when you go to work, there's certain things you don't want to do at work that are required of you, and when you don't do them, you get fired.
Yeah, that's true, but these kids are also 13 and freshmen. And I feel like throwing them into a new high school environment, why don't we have it so that the first freshman year, or even the first month of freshman year, not immediately you have all these things, we can kind of set up for that. We can say, you need to learn these things. I know that from my freshman year to my senior year, we do take school seriously. We understand college. Kids like, oh my God, I have to do college applications. I don't even know this was quick here. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. If we start this education earlier, these skills earlier, then perhaps we'll see a better outcome. But as of right now, according to the freshman class as well, they do not feel prepared for this type of rigor. And maybe not even rigor of this type of program. And I don't know if that will be implemented earlier, if that is something we just need to switch completely. But according to these survey results, it's not going to.
I know you're wanting to move on.
Yeah, but I'm going to just go there.
So last year we did have an incentive, it was a small incentive, because that's what I'm allowed, where every student that showed growth got a small token of some sort, and it probably wasn't what everybody wanted, but it was like the rubber band bracelets, a piece of candy, stickers, that kind of stuff, like the water bottle stickers, all of those. And then they were put in a drawing for a gift card, for a few different gift cards, one per grade level for math and one per grade level for reading. This year, Edmonton has offered to provide gift cards to us so that we can do incentives for teachers, for time on task, incentive for teachers for growth, and then incentive for students to do the drawing thing for a larger amount. And then do, we can still do the individual pieces. So we do have incentive ideas, it's not set up yet.
If we focus on growth, we saw almost what Mr. Ray said, there's kids that don't take it seriously in the beginning, and then they grow 200 points by the end. What about the kids that take it seriously at the beginning? And I feel like once again, it's not based on the top 5%, but even within those, well, we can say bottom 95%, there are kids who take school seriously. There are kids who will take it seriously because of the
Last year, the kids that got in the 1,450 range where they couldn't grow as much, they got the incentive anyway. They didn't have to show the growth.
Okay, we need to stop.
Guys, first off, I want to thank everyone for participating in this productive work session. We do need to get the room set up for the regular board meeting, and thank you all for being here today.
And you too. Thank you. That's Alex.
Thanks for inviting me.
Miss Lane and Miss Murray, I have one more comment.
Thank you. We moved from the work session now into the actual meeting part. So at this time, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. I turned the AC on. I think the secretary's.
They did.
They get cold. Motion passes 4-0.
And next on the agenda is recognition. So it's with great pleasure and pride, and we'll turn over to Mr. Martin because we have several important recognitions today.
We do. We actually have an athletic, an academic, and an employee recognition today. So we've got a well-balanced recognition groups. The first group I would like to recognize is the Preston High School girls cross-country team, along with individual boys team member Damian Rumer. The team is coached by Paul Martin and is assisted by Matthew Bright, Paul Sines, and Brian Miller. The team had an extremely successful year this year. The girls captured its second consecutive Big Ten Conference championship and qualified and finished fourth overall with the West Virginia State cross-country meet. I'm not going to say by how many points they finished. They were very, very, very close to finishing third. They were 1 point off from finishing third overall, but the young ladies had an outstanding season this year for sure. In addition, team member, let's see if I jump down here. Also, team member Damian Rumer also qualified for the state meet this year and several team members qualified for all state honors. Members of the team include Hallie Simmons, Ella White, Delilah Myers, Autumn Myers, Ava Simmons, Sophia Sereno, Leighton Bierman, and Hannah Liston. A few things individually, Hallie Simmons finished 14th overall at the state meet, earning second team all-state honors. Boys team member Damian Rumor also qualified and finished 19th overall, also earning second team all-state honors. I just want to wish congratulations to the entire program on an outstanding season, and I will turn it over to Coach Paul Martin to, I'm sure will have plenty to say.
I think little brother stole all my thunder. I've got a lot of good things to talk about with this group.
That microphone should be working.
All right, thank you, brother.
Before you start, congratulations.
Thank you, Bruce, appreciate it. This is actually year number 27 for me as a coach, and I think I say this every year, but definitely one of my favorite years as a coach. There was a lot of distractions, a lot of things going on, and the kids handled it so well. And in my 27 years on the girls' side, I think this is at least maybe the third best team that I've ever coached. And that's the other teams were state runners-up or state champions. Just an incredible group. One of the things that really stands out to me about the girls' team in particular is literally minutes after the state championship. In so many words, there's like, let's not shut this down, let's keep things going. So actually this weekend, they're going to be traveling to Cary, North Carolina to compete in the Nike Southeast Championship. So really excited to see, we know where they're at on the state stage. As Mr. Martin mentioned, we missed third place by 1 point. That was kind of our big goal that we were looking for. But it's going to be nice to see where they're at from a regional standpoint in the Southeast United States. So they're the first group that's put forth the effort to extend their season as a team, and they can, again, be congratulated for that. You mentioned about Damian Rumor, had an outstanding year, finishing 19th. That was a goal of his, and some parents said, they kind of could hear my enthusiasm on the Facebook pages as he was climbing in. But I do want to point out a couple things before we bring the kids up. I think for all the board members, I gave you a copy of the program ad that's within the SSAC program book, the state meet program. And there's three things that I like to point out. The first is the location of Preston High School. And of course, it's located in Kingwood, West Virginia, but our school is much, much more than just Kingwood. It's a great representation, and this group's an example of it, of the entire county. So I never list Kingwood. I always list the Free State of Preston. That's the motto of Preston County, and again, that's indicative of the entire county. On our team, we had 2 runners from Aurora, 3 from Central Preston, 1 from Terre East Preston, and 1 from Brewston, and 1 from West Preston. So literally all corners of our county. The second thing I always include within our coaching staff are middle school coaches. They have a huge a place in the development of these young athletes. So I just want to kind of mention them right now. C.G. Baked at Aurora, Pete Daly and Heather Parks at Brewston, Tiffany Piles and Lisa Weaver at Central Preston, Jana Wolf at South Preston, Mary Hart at Terre East Preston, and Philip Brinker at West Preston. And the last thing I'd like to mention is down at the bottom, the team-sponsored page. We're very proud as a program that we can, what we believe, give a first-class experience for our athletes, from the way they dress, the places we go, the accommodations, even down to the meals. And that's funded entirely by our program. And again, that's something we take great pride in. And again, those funds from night-night relays go directly back to our kids. So at this time, I'll go ahead and call all of them up, if you don't mind coming up, boys and girls. Boys, singular, and girls. And we'll kind of go in grade order. First up is Ella White, a senior. My phone rings a lot for Ella White from other schools across. I literally got a call from Robert Morris University before coming up here. So she is heavily recruited. It's taken a lot of official and unofficial visits to a variety of different colleges. As mentioned, finishing as a second team All-State, Miss Hallie Simmons, a junior. Hannah Liston, a sophomore. Autumn Myers, a sophomore. Delilah Myers, a sophomore. And our 2 freshmen, Leighton Bierman, Ava Simmons, and our alternate at States was Sophia Sereno, a senior. And of course, Mr. Rumor, Damian Rumor.
Okay, if we could give these teams and the cross-country team a big round of applause. If you'd hold tight, I think the board would like to shake hands, get a picture.
Do you want to see
Get one out and one with.
A good look.
Okay. You want one with you all the time?
Sure.
Okay, let's give these guys a big round of applause.
Congratulations to all, and good luck this weekend. That is a huge event. If those of you are not familiar with it, some of the best runners in America.
I do have one thing before I leave. I know Mr. Huggins, maybe Mr. Martin, maybe some other people within the room. I know Mr. McCrum will know this, but there was a famous football coach all the way back to the Houston Oilers, Bum Phillips. And Mr. Phillips is known for some interesting remarks for sure. And so I'd like to quote Mr. Phillips, and it has significance with this
And it is
squad.
appropriate, right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Huggins. I will tone it down. But this is not verbatim, but close. Last year, we knocked on the door. This year, we beat on it. Next year, we're going to kick the son of a gun in. And the reason that's symbolic, last year, our girls' team were Big Ten champions and missed out so close to qualifying for states. This year, repeated as Big Ten champions, and as Mr. Martin mentioned, we're 1 point away from finishing third. But our ultimate goal every single year is to get on the podium. If you've ever been to the state championship at Cabell Midland, they have probably the most amazing award ceremony of any state championship event in the nation, in my opinion. And so the kick in the whatever in is a symbolic of us getting on that stage next year. And I think we've got the pieces in place, and we've got the motivation and the talent to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Martin, next.
Okay, our next delegation group is actually our Preston High School FFA members, along with their sponsors, Mrs. Samantha Funk and Mr. Terry Hauser. I do want to call attention to the fact that during the course of the national conference at Indianapolis, that Mrs. Funk, along with 7 other West Virginia educators, received, I hope I'm saying this right, the honorary American degree, where Samantha received that in a special ceremony at Indianapolis. At this point, I would ask if the members of the Preston High School FFA, along with Mrs. Funk and Mr. Hauser, could come in. And board members, you can see they brought a strong contingent to the national conference in Indianapolis. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hauser or Mrs. Funk if you guys would like to say a few words. And first of all, congratulations, Mrs. Funk, on your honorary American degree. that you received while in Indianapolis. So I can turn it over to either of you if you'd like to say a few words about your experience out in Indianapolis.
Okay. We'll both chip in a little bit. We don't talk ranking. In 1923, 13 Virginia farm boys gathered to start what is now known as the National FFA and National FFA Convention. And it's become a cherished tradition to make the trip, which once or for many years was in Kansas City, moved to Louisville, then Indianapolis, back to Louisville, and now they've kind of found a final resting place, but at least for now, they're home in Indianapolis. The organization has grown so rapidly that they no longer fit in many cities. So Indianapolis is one of the few cities in America that have the accommodations for the growth of the FFA. This year they had another record attendance, just shy of 73,000 registrations, 72,954 to be exact. So it's a privilege to take our rural youth to the big city, let them experience all that that has to offer, let them cherish their rural Preston County, because after a week out there, sometimes they're very much ready to come home, as are we. But we do many things while we're there. And I'm going to let Ms. Funk tell you about the activities we did while we were there that week.
On the way out, we stopped in Dayton, Ohio at the U.S. Air Force Museum, which is always a pretty cool thing. I've been there several times, and I'm not sure I've made it clear to the back yet. If you've ever been there.
Yeah, that's a picture I showed.
While we were at convention, we went to several different sessions. We were able to see a rodeo at the different sessions. We saw award winners. We saw one of our previous members, Madison Lawyer, who's a state officer, that he got to be the flag bearer for West Virginia, so that was pretty cool. We also toured Fair Oaks Farm, so if you've ever had Fairlife milk, we got to see where they make it. They milk 3,000 cows just at their facility. Then they have feeder facilities that feed that. And we also got to see their hog operation, which they raise at any given time 9,000 hogs at a time. So that was a pretty cool thing to go and see. But I think it's a good experience. The kids got a lot of bonding time. We got to share some good meals together. We shared meals and we stayed with Petersburg and Warfield and FFA chapters. So we got to spend some time with other West Virginia chapters. And thankfully, since Mr. Hauser's son Andrew teaches in Texas, we got to spend a lot of time with some Texas kids and make friends from across the country. So.
And about that time, we kissed the bricks at the brickyard.
Cool.
In Indianapolis too.
That's neat. Okay, at this juncture, if we could please give our FFA students and sponsors a big round of applause. Photo?
That's right. You showed us that one.
Well, that's only for
See, they did work.
Let's give these guys a big round of applause.
Congratulations, Ms. Funk. Ms. Funk, I know that is a huge award that you won. And we just want to make sure that everybody understands that. I mean, from what Mr. Kisner's told me, this is extremely hard to receive. And thank you for representing Preston County and Preston High School. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
I asked the grade teacher to receive.
That's huge. And again, Mr. Kisner filled me in to make sure I understood how important that was. So, thank you. Okay, Mr. Martin, next.
Okay, and last but not least, I would like to recognize members of our transportation department. Out of 55 West Virginia counties, Preston County Schools Transportation Department mechanics, along with Secretary Mrs. Foley and Director Mr. Plum, came in 4th place overall on a state-issued proficiency scorecard. Transportation Steve Plum believes this is the first time the Preston County Schools has received this high of an honor for transportation. According to Mr. Plum, the county scored 105 out of 115 points, placing them in 4th place overall. And I think there was a new system that once implemented would have had a perfect score had that been implemented within the timeline. Yeah. Categories observed for this ranking include certification, mileage, paperwork, state reporting, bus inspections, efficiency of repair of buses, and total efficiency of the transportation department. I must note, you know, in the garage, they've been running short. We've traditionally had 5 mechanics. We've had 4. Several members of the transportation, of the mechanic crew have been driving almost daily. So we just really want to express our appreciation for all the work that the transportation department, not only our mechanics and Mrs. Foley and Mr. Plum, but all of our drivers as well. We're very proud of their accomplishment, and we just wanted to recognize them today. So, Mr. Plum, if you could bring you and everyone come forward to be recognized. And Mr. Plum, is there anything you would want to add to?
The other thing, I guess, is the 8 new buses, because the factory's being retooled, is a year delay, so they're doing all this and keeping the old buses running too.
And it's much appreciated.
Do they give any bonus points after reviewing our roads?
They should.
Steve, introduce everybody.
That's a very good point.
Steve, introduce everybody.
Ms. Plum, do you mind introducing everyone?
So we have Richard Wilson on this side, Stacy Hauser, Chief Mechanic, our Secretary, Cindy Foley, Dana Sanders, and Rob Smith.
Okay, if we could give everyone, these guys and ladies, a big round of applause.
How many days have you had that you had to shut off? I know, I'm sure, what, 2 weeks ago, you shut down 9 runners. Wow. We have had to do that.
Matt, how many we've had to shut down? I think the most we've done this year is 3.
Outstanding.
Okay, if we can give these, every one of these guys a big round of applause.
And thank you as well. Mr. Kisner asked bonus points for the roads. I actually agree with him. If people have never ridden a bus with some of these drivers, the roads they go on is phenomenal. And the mechanics, coming from the driver's ed teacher, they kept me on the road every day. And it's much appreciated. So, and Mr. Plum, thank you. And thank you for making sure we knew that information. Anything else, Mr. Martin, under recognition?
That would be all that's under recognition today, Mr.
Okay, moving on. Under delegations, none was ahead of time. Mr. McCrum? Thank you. Next will be presentations. Ms. Kerstetter.
And Mr. Huggins, I will say Mrs. Miller has actually got commitments at West Preston today. The State Department is on site there. I will likely reschedule her presentation to the meeting at Kingwood Elementary.
Okay, thank you. How dare the State Department take over our meeting? Us.
Oh, I have the board docs open on the other browser. You can probably pull up whatever you need there. Go to, no, the Chrome browser. There you go.
For me to be hard, it's hard. I hate to be told.
And then the fire marshal recommendation, I started exposing the door at the end of the hall, and that traps the heat up there. I was submitting all the reports, and that was one of the items. Threw all the woodchucks away. What's that?
Is Janice here?
That's why I said Janice.
I thought you said Miss Schaefer.
No, Mrs. Schaefer is.
Oh, I see. I apologize, I misunderstood.
No, they're out there west, because West has that improvement designation, so she's meeting with them.
Mr. Kisner. Mr. Kisner, thank you for telling me about her. Because that's huge.
It's a lot of work. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all effort.
I didn't know that.
The power, it's not, I mean,
It's going to be presentation.
I think, when you think hindsight, you probably would do that in the future, because that's huge.
I don't know what the school does.
I mean, that's like a national.
I'm sure Hauser has, like, I'm sure he got it years ago, but I'm just saying, to go through all that effort and all that work, to make the effort, that represents us very well.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Oh, yeah.
It's above and beyond what she does for the students.
but that's all I wanted to make sure, because
Yeah, well, I was going to if you did. I'm glad you did, before your place.
we talked about it.
Perhaps let somebody else. I'm marking it down.
Calendar, start making it out.
That's why I just call it teamwork.
Really not a lot of
But I did give you like the summary of this to kind of break it out. It wasn't the PowerPoint. But this is pretty much a pretty format here. So a couple things. Financial statements have been submitted. They were due September 29th. They were submitted on the 25th. The auditors are currently here. So they'll be here for probably until the end of December, into January. So that's at what point they will go out to the schools and perform and actually do the audited financial statements. So all this is unaudited information.
Just close that out to the far right there, Mrs. Farner. Okay.
Okay, anyways, I've given you the historical data for our fund balance on here. So we are currently, last year we were at a total fund balance, now this is Fund 11, of 8.9. This year we are at 11 million. It is broken out into several categories. So the 11 million is actually our money, not actually like a project and or the levy and or something that we can't necessarily touch. There's some retirement money that we account for that obviously can only be used for retirement. So the 11 million. Now keep in mind, yes, it's a huge number. And if you look at the historical data, go like, I've given you back to 2016, it was like 2 million. We've had ESSER money, we've had the levy, so we were able to, especially with the ESSER money, is where this is mainly allowed us to accumulate some money. It's given us a great deal of ability to kind of store money. Because obviously, for a while there, any custodial supplies or some excess teacher requirements, a lot of the travel for professional development, a lot of the software for the instructional things, were able to come out of ESSER. A lot of that will not be able to go away necessarily because ESSER went away. So that will actually have to come back into the general budget, and that number will come down, and it will start dropping. But at least we have a good cushion now, so we will have the ability to move forward comfortably. So you can see the change in the fund balance increased, and then also the assigned fund balance, which is a really good one part. And the final part that I give is the child nutrition. Because I like child nutrition, I think is completely funded, but it's a big chunk of our money goes to child nutrition to cover the difference that the federal government does not pay us. And that is just, every county has that issue, that's how it works. But we're doing great. We're right on point where we ought to be. 22 was, once again, a lovely year because, in a good way, because ESSER gave us significantly more money because of COVID funding. So that is a fluke in the sense that it's not something that is sustainable. We're not going to have 64,000 transfer. The 300,000 pretty much is really where we should be sitting at the number that we should be transferring over to child nutrition. So I also gave you the financial statement documentation, but like I said, it's actually unaudited version.
What's the spike in 2020?
That was prior control. And I really can't tell you why it necessarily went up, but as you can see, it has leveled back off to where it ought to be.
Okay, thank you.
So to clarify, the 11 million that we currently have in our fund balance, that's free cash that is not attached in some way?
It's not attached to anything, yes. I mean, that's obviously what we pay for a lot of things out of. But it is not necessarily attached to something very specific. We could use it for teachers or instructional supplies or.
Is it currently budgeted, or is that?
It's budgeted in a certain sense. No, actually, a lot of it, not a lot of it. Some of it is in reserve because we have to keep a 3% to 5% reserve. So it is actually sitting in reserve. I keep the max because that is a.
That's only probably like 2-3 million that would be required reserves.
3 or 4 million sitting there. So, and I don't touch that unless I absolutely have to. But the rest is budgeted. We have the maintenance and transportation and things like that. There's a huge amount of money sitting there.
That I'm confused. So that makes, we have a budget for excluding the reserves.
That is what is budgeted. The 11 million is what we have to budget. I actually have to budget it. It's not just.
So you do have a budget for that 11 million, but that's.
But including in that is a reserve.
Okay, and is that given to us, the budget for that, in this document, or?
No, not in this document. This is not what, the budget has nothing to do with it.
But that'll just be something for the future?
Yes, you actually, in this, today, you will actually vote on the budget carryover that will include the, I only estimate a small amount of carryover in May. So in October, I make it match the correct fund balance and I re-budget. You actually approve that today, along with the other funds that I reset up. So I have to reset them up. And I would say, notably, changes this year with financial statements are that we, with the newest GASB, which is what financial statements are pretty much controlled by, we have to now account for all online subscriptions that we purchase and count as they are an asset, which means we have to document them differently within our financial statements. But this would be the first year we did leases last year, or 5 years. But it's just something different that you will see in the financial statements from the prior year.
Historically, they've been an expense, and they're now being carried as an asset, right?
They're just, yeah, seen differently. It's still coming.
But as they expire, they get expensed.
They're actually different than the leases, which is actually expensed every year. They're actually expensed in 1 year and then just shown separately because of the usage, depending on. And that probably will change because the textbooks are what really, honestly, the only thing that hits our financial statements are the textbooks because we buy them upfront in that 1 year, and then we have access to online, and they said anything that is adjustable. So if you can highlight the document, even if it's like a PDF, if you can highlight the PDF, it is considered a subscription. So for that 6 years, we have to account for it differently. The state may change how they require us to adopt textbooks and such because of that. Maybe not, but that's really how they make us adopt those things anyways, but it might change.
Since the auditor's going to be going to the schools, can you update us on any progress we've made in addressing prior year findings of like separation of duties, et cetera?
There have been no changes because at this time, there are no personnel changes that have been able to occur to alleviate those separation issues.
But we wouldn't be able to shift it around with existing personnel?
Not at the schools that only have 1 secretary. It's just not doable because the principal can't do anything because of the signer on checks and things like that. They can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really can't have too many, you don't want just some outside person doing the financial statements.
But
And
like,
they would have to be in our financial.
with the schools, say the schools that have a dean of students or assistant principals,
They are typically the second signer.
they're the second signer.
You have to have 2 signatures on each. So you have typically your assistant or a dean, the principal, and sometimes the chair of the faculty senate, and or maybe some other head teacher kind of position. They are all signers, so they cannot do certain things, or once again, it's a segregation of duty.
So there's no solution ever for this other than an additional position at the county office? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, really, there's not. The schools that have 2 secretaries can alleviate it, yes. But if they don't have 2 secretaries, then really there's just not much we can do about it. We are not alone. There are many counties who the county office have segregation of duty issues.
Would a secretary at one school be able to be the opposite for the other school? I mean, with electronics?
That would be a nightmare to do that kind of thing because of the time it would take for them to because the only way to easily take care of it is if they do the reconciliation of the bank. Well, to do that, that takes some significant time when you have absolutely no knowledge of what's going on that month in that school. That would be a lot to put on to a different secretary who's dealing with the day-to-day things as well. I'm just not sure that that would be something that would be easy.
I mean, we're dealing with fairly large budgets looking at some of your balance carryovers for the school. Well, there's still, I mean,
The schools are not.
80,
at all.
90,000.
This has nothing to do with the school. I didn't give you the school money. Most schools have $10,000 in their bank. Ultimately. The only school that doesn't is, Preston. Same.
But with that in mind, how many transactions a month does a normal school have?
Rollsburg in a year has 10.
Okay, so
then how hard would it be?
So I guess that's where I'm
But
coming
it's
from with
still-
the one
To put it
school.
on to someone else is that it's still an undertaking because when they're already doing day-to-day things.
Okay, but just,
So how, I mean, because they have to, like, to deposit, a good way to segregate is someone does the deposits, someone does the checks. Well, someone has to be physically there to do the deposits, someone has to be physically there to do the checks.
Yeah.
They can't have access, you do, once again, you don't want a ton of hands in the books.
yeah, and I'm sorry, just to clarify, all that one of my thoughts was just that the secretary who's already doing the reconciliation for Terrata could do Brewston's. The secretary at Brewston who was already doing Brewston's would do
But Brewston,
Terrata.
once again, Brewston has way more.
No, and that's what I'm saying, like, I don't know whether,
Way.
yeah.
Rollsburg literally has 10, but Rollsburg is
Right.
extremely tiny.
And so I'm saying like Brewston and West, similar size, Terrata and, you know, like Rollsburg is gonna swap with the small schools with the small schools. Again, I'm just asking, I mean, that's all that we were just like,
I would not advise to do a cross school. And I mean, maybe like a Fellows-Will Rollsburg, because you already have a principal who's in that kind of capacity and could help move things, but when you're talking about things that have to be done that day and handed out or transferred, it would not be.
well, but I'm just talking about bank recs, just bank recs. So that's what I'm asking is like, what, is there any of those that have to be done like on a single day?
No, but that's still, they'd have to work that into.
I guess maybe if I'm listening,
Harder for another school to take that on.
if I'm understanding too, because some of our secretaries are, and they all do more than, so please don't misunderstand. But some of them also are the medical people.
It's true.
So if you take that secretary out to go to school, there's nobody there medically. I think that's what.
For a bank rec, the only thing that would have to happen is a bank statement gets sent from Terrata to Brewston, and from Brewston to Terrata, however you're gonna do it, like whatever the swap is, but I'm not adding to anybody's plate, I'm swapping the work they're doing. They're used to doing it for their school, and they're gonna do the same work for over here. And literally, the only thing in a bank rec that you have to know is you have to see the check number, the check amount, the date, and who it was to. Like, all information that's gonna be present on the bank statement. And now the software is the side, and that's the side that I don't know that I mean, like from your side is what we see on our side.
Done through the software.
Through Weavis or whatever.
No, through their school funds.
Through their separate, okay. What do most schools use? Like a QuickBooks, or do they use their?
School funds online.
School funds online, so their own kind of a ledger program or whatever.
And it's done, it's like a step-by-step.
So it's a cloud-based.
Yes.
So it's not even like it's on a desktop or something where they have to get access. It can be accessed from virtually anywhere.
They have to be in the other person's.
Right.
Documents.
Right.
To do it.
So you said earlier that the best way to do this would be having two secretaries.
Not necessarily, not at each
So
school, no, that makes
what
sense.
is, so it sounds like that this option to have a cross-school thing is not exactly viable. It sounds like there'd be a lot of complications, there'd be issues with it. Is there any other option that is easily done, or not even easily done, that is better suited? That is like, we could, as perspective in the next, say, 5 years? Because obviously there is a problem with segregation duty. Is there anything we can do or train someone outside of this that would be more invested? Is there any, like, what would you suggest if this is a cross-school thing, not a good thing, we don't have enough people for two security? What would you suggest? So it seems like this seems to be an issue, so like, what can we do instead?
One person who would do bank recs for the schools and or some other vendor things and things of that nature that really should be out of the school system anyways, to do those items.
So could we set something, it's like, is there a way to set that up for the next 5 years? Like, it's like someone that's already within the county personnel, or we have
It
to
would be,
hire
it's
someone
not something
outside?
to do with somebody that's already in the
So you have to hire, but, and then within this $11 million or whatever, would their salary have to come out of that? Like, would we be budgeted for another person to do these things?
You could.
You could, there is a way.
Out of that, yeah, I mean, that's.
So is that something we should look into?
I would say though, right now, we are tentatively looking at 20-plus cuts at both the professional
So
and
that's what
service
I'm
personnel
wondering
for the
is-
coming year.
So at this point, it's a, it would be a concept, not necessarily financially.
And I will say, to Ms. Kerstetter and Mr. Martin's defense, having been in the meeting with the auditor, he was very lackadaisical about this finding. He continues to point out that almost everybody has it. This is not something unique to us. It is something, again, remember that in an audit, they go off of government standards and things of that nature, the GASB outline. So they're going off of that, and they're saying, based on this, this is a deficiency. The state is not, by the auditor's words, not concerned about it. That doesn't mean I'm not concerned about it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try to alleviate it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I agree with Mr. Tracy Holder. I think some of this we can address, and we should. I think we could. I don't know if that would in itself get rid of the finding, but it would definitely be moving in the right direction, and I think that would be a good thing that we should do. But with that said, I will say, the auditor was very on this note, from my perspective and observation, lackadaisical about it. He did not find it serious. He was not, his thing was, this is something that you're gonna have. I have to report it because it's in the standards. But it's not something that the state is concerned about, because they know if they want to solve it, somebody has to find some funds to add staff in areas that they're not currently putting into the equation for how much money they give you.
Yes.
So I do understand when they're looking at the budget and we're trying to be fiscally responsible. I still think that some things like bank recs, I think that could be done across school secretary. I don't see everything she's on the backside, but I do think a lot of that is pretty simple. The one thing that I would ask though is, and I don't know which one of you would be the more appropriate one, but I mean, something that was definitely easily rectified from the audit was our schools not having necessarily all of their PTO bank statements and things of that nature was in those findings. Did we make it, I mean, have we made efforts to reach out, remind principals that they need to be reminding their PTOs? Do we know if we got better response onto that? Do we know where we're at to even know before the auditor sees it that we know we're missing this?
I know the problems, yes, they have, some of the schools routinely just have trouble with a couple of the boosters. And I think moving forward, beginning next year, we're probably gonna have to do another approval, high-end approval, where they're gonna have to submit everything at one time. If they don't, then they're not allowed to function within our county. Because they're not playing ball. Ultimately, they're just not playing ball at all. There are a couple that are just extremely difficult. Some are great. Some, every time that the principals ask for it, they have turned it in, it's great. Some are there's just one or two that are very difficult to keep, and they pop up too. So within a year, you think you have them, and then turns out there was a new one. So it's a constant battle with those subs.
Yeah, I mean, I found in my professional life.
They have actively tried to.
Okay, so we made some efforts, and I can say, just documenting where our shortcomings are, knowing exactly who those are, and again, like you said, if we've got to say you can no longer be affiliated, that's not what we want, let's make it work. But I have found banks from my professional career to be they'll just give me the form, and I'll just hand it to a client and say, I need you to sign this, so that I can help you, help me help you. And I know, again, that's putting work on somebody internally, and I'm not saying anybody's twiddling thumbs, but there are some steps that we could make, or say to the principals or secretary, say, listen, tell the band boosters they have to sign this at their next meeting. If they don't, the following meeting, we're going to inform them that we can't be affiliated if they're not going to be open books because we're responsible. And if we're responsible, we need to have copies of those statements. But anyways, thank you very much.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, the essence of the GASB, segregation part, is to prevent fraud. Ultimately, removing the bank rack isn't necessarily going to prevent the fraud. Now, we've had one secretary in the schools for eons. But it's not, that won't necessarily prevent what the actual GASB is trying to do. It's where you get into the receipts and, and the checks. That's where you're running into.
That's your issue, your receipts and your checks, especially if we're dealing with small school fundraisers.
But that is exponentially harder to deal with. And like I said, there's not been any issue. There's been no issue that I've ever known that being a problem. It's just simply something that.
But how do we know that if we're not looking for it, if we don't have a system in place?
There's always been audits on them. There's always been checks, but in the sense that doing it separately, no, it's not been separate activities. But someone has always gone into the books of these schools and looked to see if everything matches. And also keep in mind, when you get the audit, if you see a late PO or something they get dinged for anything because it's such a small quantity. So there's no buffer. It's like everyone can screw up once, essentially. So, and if they do, it's going to show up in the report. So keep that in mind when you see these. I mean, they know the process, but sometimes literally every one of in some of the schools, every one of their checks, every one of their POs is looked at. If they mess up in any form, it's going to show up.
And I understand that, and
I just want to make sure everyone's aware of just the.
Right, I get it.
This isn't an audit, and at the school level. Yeah. It's a different type.
And I understand that, and I appreciate it. But with that being said, I mean, we're dealing with public money, and we're dealing with a lot of times donations, and people are putting money into the school system, and we're currently later on going to be voting for a levy where people need to have that faith, and it needs to be at 100%. And so we should be looking at every single item, and if they find something that's inconsistent, then they need to point it out, as they are doing. But I still firmly believe that we can make steps to change the process with our existing resources to improve it. Because I think the biggest tool to fight fraud is for everyone to know that someone else is looking, because then it takes two. And I'm not being critical of you, I'm just saying I think we can solve this process and improve it.
Okay. It's a tough situation, and I know you'll work on it. That's all I think Mr. Tatham's saying. If you come up with an idea and bring back to the board how to fix it, that's all he's, I think, basically asking. It's not putting you on the spot. You don't have an answer today. None of us would. And again, I'm looking as the secretaries from everything we asked them to do already. I get it. And everybody, we're asking everybody. Mr. Martin made a comment, cutting positions, which is going to make it even tougher. But if you could come up with an idea, I think is what Mr. Tatham's saying, because we do want to be transparent.
Right.
It is public funds, and we want their support. And you do a great job. It's nothing, none of this is personal. So we know what you're doing. Is there anything else on your presentation?
No, it's just an update. You'll see more, once the audit.
And thank you. I know later on you're on there, but congratulations too for the position of the state position that you hold. We appreciate you as well representing Preston County. Anything else for Ms. Kerstetter?
Will Ms. Kerstetter be with us when we get to the October monthly financial report, or are you stepping out? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerstetter. Okay, next, Ms. Laura Schaefer.
They have copies, Mr. Schaefer.
Oh, you already have?
Well, go ahead and give it to them, because they have to kind of flip through, so that if you have them already made. I put it in this morning.
He's put one back.
Yeah, give him one.
Thank you. I think you gave me a second one last week. Like I had to.
Oh, sorry.
Let's tell you need one for each hand.
Okay. Does everyone have a two-page now? Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so we started out the year down one counselor position, which was Rollsburg and Sellersville, because the Rollsburg and Sellersville counselor had filled the west position that one of our counselors left. And so that's where we started initially. Then the counselor at South also decided that she wanted to go into private practice. So, which is what the one at West did also. So that's where we started the year kind of. It was initially very soon into the beginning of the year that we had these couple positions that were not filled. And so we've been we've been trying to talk to all the schools that could potentially have counselors who were coming out. All the counselors have been talking to their friends, trying to fill these positions. But in the meantime, our amazing team has stepped up and we made a schedule so that we kind of divided it into two teams. There's Team South and Team Rollsburg and Fellows,ville, so that as much as possible, they have the same counselors going into those schools so that they can build relationships with the staff and with the students. So that's what we're doing right now. We also, I spoke with our communities and schools, people at the state, and made sure that even our communities and schools people could go out to those schools and cover whatever was needed for the schools that are in need. And so all of our people, the entire student support team is either on call, that everybody's taking turns. They're either on call so that if something happens, they can go out, or they actually physically go out to the schools once a week and meet with kids and help with whatever needs to be done. So that's the beginning of what we're doing. We've streamlined the attendance process, and it was a little, like I had created it 2.5 years ago, like created forms and that kind of stuff. It was a little bit cumbersome. So we have now streamlined the process, and it's available to everyone. It's basically a one-pager that they can check off boxes, and so they know what needs to go into the packets when an attendance issue comes to the county level. At the county level, we've been doing SAT meetings, doing IEP meetings. If they're students who are identified as McKinney-Vento, if they're students who have chronic truancy, home visits, making parent contacts, all the things that help parents to understand that their kids need to be in school and to help assuage whatever issues there are that keep them from going to school. This year, we've worked with principals to organize their school level attendance and student support teams. Last year, we discovered, we were working closely with a student at West, and we would go out regularly to meet with them. We would go out and meet with their student support team, their school student support team. And in doing that, we had a lot of discussions about how necessary that really was to us working with students in schools. So I asked the principals to create a student support team at each school so that they have a group of people whose eyes are on what's going on with their kids. Many of the schools already had that, a few of them didn't and have created it, and so we go out once a month. Sometimes it's just me, sometimes it's any of the three of us together. But we go out, talk to them about what's going on with particular students, what needs they have. We just have eyes on what's going on attendance-wise, what's going on as far as student needs are concerned. So we've been doing that this school year. It has really proven to be a big help. We go out to all of the schools once a month. We meet with Preston High. We go out with Preston. We go meet with Preston High once a week. We have a standing appointment with the whole Preston High team, counselors, all of student support, CIS, all of the administrators, so that we can make sure that we're covering our bases with all of our kids, and just are aware of what's going on. And through that, we've already had a couple of cases rise to the county level, having CA2 meetings with them, following up, and we filed 2 educational neglect petitions at this point, based on all of the work. Prior to ever filing an educational neglect petition, we have met with families over and over and over again. We meet, after the initial CA2 meeting, we meet with them like every 4 weeks to make sure that they are coming, to make sure that they are, that they don't have needs that we don't know about, to encourage them and make sure that we are supporting them. So that whole process is in place and continues to work. We also have several families who are still in the court process, and I attend those court hearings. So we've actually built a really positive relationship with CPS. We try to be aware when students are removed from their homes. I mean, it's a very, it can be a very traumatic event in their lives, and we do our best to support them, to make sure that we have eyes on them and know what's going on with them at each school. And the same with Preston probation. We meet with them once a month and try and figure out if there's things that we need to do to help those kids. So for the first time this year, I'm really excited about our School Attendance Matters Month. We celebrated it in September.
How many of you saw yard signs and the big billboard across from Walmart? So we really did a lot of work, and I absolutely can take no credit for what happened in our K-8 schools, because our attendance, our student support people, counselors, student support, CISs, took the ball and ran hard with it at each school. Brewston had all kinds of success with their attendance for September. They had over 300 kids who were there every single day for the month of September, which is amazing because it's buckwheat. So it was pretty good. Kingwood did amazing things. Like, all of the schools did amazing things for their kids, offered competitions, offered all kinds of stuff to help their students know that attendance matters. And lots of those things that they started in September, they've continued doing. So they're continuing the competitions, they're continuing the incentives and those kinds of things. So I'm really excited about what I see happening with our attendance in that regard. And the high school is kind of regrouping and working toward what we're going to do for those kids. So the next page is our attendance rates. With the exception of one school, all of the attendance rates went up. And that one school is Rollsburg, and there's a reason for that. We have a situation where we're trying to find a couple students. So because their numbers are so low to begin with, having a couple students who we can't locate has tanked their numbers. So when we get that found out and fixed, I look for their numbers to be up also. But every single school's numbers have gone up, which is really exciting, really, really exciting. Anybody have any questions about attendance so far?
Yeah, I have some questions. This would be, I guess, mostly with the fourth bullet point on page 2. It's talking about the school attendance review board and compulsory attendance meetings. Does that CA2 mean that there's been 2? What does the 2 mean? CA2?
That's a great question, and it's a state term, and it's compulsory attendance, but I have no idea what the 2 stands for.
Okay, so how many of these meetings have, because it looks like we have held CA2 meetings and CA2 follow-up meetings for approximately 75 students since the beginning of the school year. So there's 75.
I would say 75 meetings. It should say 75 meetings.
Oh, it does say 75. No, it says approximately 75 students.
Oh, it should, I apologize for that. It should say approximately 75 meetings since the beginning of the school year.
So,
I would say that's for about 20 students.
how many?
About 20.
So we have 20 students that are, would that be like habitually absent or truant? Would it be the, okay. And what progress have we had on those students?
Most of them are coming. The ones who haven't been coming, we've moved forward with the educational neglect process.
And what's the, without any, obviously, details of individual cases, how is that manifesting? What's the progress on those?
I filed 2 court cases. That is on 4 students in the past 2 weeks.
So 2 cases, 4 students, so 16 students are still habitually absent?
No, they're improving.
So of the 20?
They're improving. We
Okay.
continue to meet with them, to follow up with them, to make sure that they continue to improve.
Okay.
And for about, I would say about 10 students, we've kind of cut them loose, and we're now not meeting with them, we're just monitoring them.
Okay, so then other than these 2 cases, which is 4 students, you feel like we don't have any significant issues of truancy or that type of issue?
Oh, no, we still have significant issues of truancy that we're working on.
But that would be,
We're working with the schools to support them first, and then it moves to me.
okay, I'm just trying to clarify. So that would just be, those students then would just be the 16 that, because I think you said you have 20 students that are having the CA2 meetings.
We have approximately 50 students who are in the court process currently, at one point or another. They're in the court process. I go to their hearings, I follow up on them. That's a approximately 50 in the county.
I think maybe to clear it up, I think you need to go back because the part that's confusing, coming from the school system, I understand what you're meaning, but there's also at the local level, and I think that's what you haven't included in this because I think that will help Mr. Tatham
Yeah, 'cause I'm
understand.
confused.
So you need to go back to the local level and explain, because the CA2s, once they're here, it's not at the local. So you need to go back to that part to explain it. And then I think you'll understand, because
Okay.
right now it's the way it is. I understand why you're confused.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you saying that you have 20 students that have truancy absences that need to be taken care of at the county level? Like they're so bad that you need to take care of 20, but across the county there's 50 total?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah,
But
you need to go back.
So I will go back. Okay, so when a student starts to miss school, if they have 3 absences, if unexcused absences, they get a letter sent home. That's a school level function. Often that is a student support team function. And although in some cases, in some schools, every school does it a little bit different. In some schools, the teacher does it. In some schools, a student support team member does it. In some schools, an administrator does it. Then at 5 unexcused absences, they get a second letter. A lot of times when they get those 2 letters, like the absences accrue, and then the parents bring in their notes and they go away. And then if they accrue again, they're going to get another letter. So that it's kind of a back and forth dance with the letters and the unexcused absences in most cases.
Just to get paperwork for them, just to make sure that they're in
Yes,
touch.
because we have to have documentation.
Yeah, I get
that
it.
We've notified them of the absences and those kinds of things. So then at 10 unexcused absences, we suggest that they have a meeting at the school level, have a meeting with those parents. I often go out to those meetings. I don't always, but I often go out to those meetings because, again, they know their students and their families better than we do at all. So a lot of times with those students, when they have those meetings, they can figure out the supports and what needs to happen, and they get letters turned in and notes turned in from doctors and those kinds of things. So if it continues to rise, that's when they come to a CA2 meeting. And this year, this implementation of us going out to meet with them once a month has really helped, because then we can sit around the table at a school and say, okay, so where are we with this process with this student? Where are we in this process with this student?
So approximately how many students are at this 10 unexcused where they've had a meeting at the school and maybe you guys have gone out to it?
There's a significant number at Preston High School, and each school probably has 5 or 6 maybe, if not a few more or a few less, depending on the school. I don't have exact numbers.
To give you an idea, back when I taught, Mr. Plum was principal, and I did the attendance, we did over 300. That was 10 or less that we did meetings on. And then, once they hit at 10 when I was there, then it was referred to the county office. Mr. Plum as principal, that was my duty.
Yeah.
So I sent it in, and I think that's where the confusion.
I'm just trying to quantify,
You're looking
yeah.
at a large number.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
it's,
a large number,
that had at least 10 unexcused with no documentation.
yes.
And so if you're saying 5 at approximately every school, that's 8 schools, there's 40, then you said a significant problem at PHS. What's the ballpark at PHS? Do we have another 250 at PHS?
That was for the year. So,
Right,
yeah.
right this minute, we probably have another 100 that we're looking at.
So 100 total or 100 in addition to the 5?
100 in addition.
So 150, let's say.
But I'd have to,
You're close.
you're close.
But we're only at November too, and they already have 10. So we have 150 students that are on our radar of you're habitually absent, no paperwork, unexcused.
Yes.
And then of that 150, now can I go to the CA2 leap that some of them are so significant that 20 of them are a CA2?
Yes, and then 4 of them are then in the court
And
because they have not all, they haven't proved it all. They don't look at-
4 of them are being added to the 50 that are already in
Right.
court.
Yeah,
So there's
the
4
other
that are
part is
starting the
that-
process,
yeah, there's
50.
4 that are
So we have a total of
where did
54 in the
this-
court
wait,
process.
Where's the original 50 in the court come from? That's from previous
The They were, the 4 that I just filed, they were those kids prior to today, prior to me filing.
No, I mean the 50 in the court.
That's what I'm saying.
That's like they're
Those-
from.
Those students who are in court now were the ones who had such significant.
Yeah, is that from just the school year?
Or is that from prior?
Last
From
year.
the last 2 school years.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering, so like, so it's not just till November, it's from, it's like a. It's
Oh, no,
constant.
it's from the last 2 school years.
Okay, okay.
Because the court process is very long.
Yeah, I figured it's
Yeah.
not.
So there's approximately 54 in the court system.
Approximately. I'd have to give you an exact number, but.
Yeah, I'm just trying to quantify. Okay.
Does that 10 reset, like with a semester or anything like that? I just remember at one point, so there must be something else that we do about excused absences that's a separate process.
So there's 5 excused parent notes per semester.
Okay.
So a lot of times, the students who have like 10 unexcused absences, we try to get their parents to write the notes, we try to get them in, we try to take care of that ahead of time so that we're reducing the number of absences that are unexcused. It's when unexcused absences roll up, and there's nothing we can do about medical notes, doctor notes. Mr. Huggins is shaking his head, because he knows, we have students who have 30 or 40 doctor's notes.
Yeah, but these are 150 that have done no paperwork, that we have no reason. So these are significant cases.
Yes.
But if I recall, Mr. Martin, it doesn't matter. It's an educational leave, it's an excused absence, it's an unexcused absence. It all counts as an absence for what the state's metrics are. So, I
It
mean,
does, and chronic, it doesn't matter. Chronic absence is, you're not in the seat. That's all that there is.
I would say though, Mrs. Schaefer, comparative to last year's attendance rate, comparative to the numbers you provided here, we're up about 1.6% right now. Which is good because we are on support status for the state, so.
And you have to try something. The sad part with the high school in particular, it was amazing how many kids, when you called them to the office, they say, go get your book bag. They cleaned the book bag. A lot of them's parents had written the notes. They just didn't turn them in. And that's a huge problem. The other aspect too is attendance that, for whatever reason, our kids don't see the correlation. And again, I'm using Mr. Plum because he was principal. It was amazing sometimes just talking to him at the local level, what it did. And I think you'll agree with me. Now, once it hits the CA2 level, the part that's imperative to get it fixed is then the court system working with the schools.
Yeah, I understand. But I mean, but 150 are in the hopper
I'd
of,
say that's close.
that they
at
are
this time.
identified as a problem.
Yes, and some of them, like, homeschool is a huge problem, because a lot of times, students, especially at the high school level, believe that if they, decide that they're gonna go to Penn Foster, for example, Penn Foster will tell them that they don't have anything else that they have to do, with us. They can just become a Penn Foster student. However, the state of West Virginia does not recognize Penn Foster as an avenue to a diploma. So if they're gonna go to Penn Foster, they have to be able to be approved for homeschool, which means that one of their parents has to have a diploma and fill out the paperwork. So, that we may have probably 6 or 7 students right this minute who are going to Penn Foster but have not done the paperwork, so they're still on our roll.
And so for these 100, I'm still going back to these 150, because this is just part of those 150, right?
Yes.
There's those 6 or 7 that's in Penn Foster, that'd be a part of the 150. So this is just like basically tracking down students and trying to get into contact with them. Does the county have resources devoted to that, or, I mean,
Our communities and schools people do that, our truancy support person does that, our McKinney-Vento person helps with that, because sometimes they're identified students. We do work very diligently to try and track them down.
do you have enough resources to get it?
There's never enough resources. Honestly, I'm not being flippant, like honestly, there's never enough, there's 1,100 kids over there, and they're all like there's a small number of them who come every day, and then there's a lot that we are just continuing to try and track down.
I did it for half a day, and I couldn't keep up. At the time,
Every day.
the county gave me a half a day schedule to do attendance. And I worked literally every day, and it was, you can't keep up. And another key, honestly, is the teachers. When teachers know a kid that's missing, if they get to the attendance team, I don't know how Preston's doing it now, so I don't want to misspeak, but teachers would give me a kid, Miss Varner's missing class. So as soon as Ms. Varner was there, we'd get her down to see what was going on. Sometimes, and that's where the finances does come in, because you have, sometimes kids are missing because they're babysitting, they're taking care of their grandparent that's dying, you know, things that we don't know, and that's where the county has to come in and work with outside sources. And I'm talking too much, I apologize.
No, but it's, all that is the truth, all that is absolutely what happens. And so, sometimes I feel like, we just, like, we have a pot that's bubbling, and whoever bubbles to the top, we take care of as soon as we can, and then we wait for the next one to bubble to the top. And it's, I mean, it's a huge, huge job. And so at the high school, I can tell you, Mr. Huggins, how they're doing it now is that each assistant principal is in charge of a grade level and is in charge of their attendance. That's why we meet with all of the principals once a week, in addition to the counselors, and so that we can kind of team what's going on with kids.
Not being critical, that's tough. As an administrator, you don't have time for those meetings. And that's where the finances comes in, Mr. Tatum. It needs to be a person, whether, however they decide to do it. I mean,
Wow, in my opinion,
Yeah, we do have additional resources now other than when.
you can throw all the resources at parents that are not gonna be accountable and don't care that you want, but we're wasting money. It all needs to be automated. There shouldn't be people involved in this. When you miss, you should get an automatic email or a piece of mail or a call. But we've got to stop throwing away money. If the parents aren't going to be held accountable and they're not going to care, it should be automated until it goes to the court system, and then they should deal with the court system. But we don't have the staff or the resources. There's no reason to throw that money away that can be used for valuable education for kids that are showing up. There are situations that maybe you can help, but the majority of...
Situations, honestly. I mean, I could name kids for you, I'm not going to. I could name kids for you who had a situation in life, we found out about the situation, we got them involved, we got them resources, we got them hooked up with either some outside resources or some of our own resources. We got a situation changed for them in some way. I mean, our team works very, very, very.
But those aren't the ones that are using so many resources that you don't have time for. Those are the ones that are responsive, that are telling you the issue. If there's a way we can help, we can help. Those aren't the time and money burners. To me, the efficiency is figuring out how we automate it. Figuring out how they get an auto call when their kid's missing, how they get an auto letter, whatever we're legally required to do. If they're responsive, those are the ones that you're going to solve. But I would not throw more money at people that don't care. If they don't care, I can't pay enough to motivate them to care.
Don't we have, is it still the case that if a kid misses a school, they already call the parents and out there? I mean, that's not at school?
I'd like to play off that. I was just about to ask. I remember when I was out in at least elementary school, when I would have a doctor's appointment, and me and my mom would be like in the doctor's room waiting for the doctor to come in, and she'd be like, "Oh, there's the school calling me, telling me you're not in school."
Yeah,
Like I know at one point there was definitely a system that did that. So
When we were on school messenger, unfortunately, when that contract lapsed, our current service doesn't make calls.
Yeah, because we used to have that.
We don't do that anymore.
That was,
it used to be a thing.
My parents were in the winter, because all the school, they had like 3 different call centers, and oh, here y'all go. Like,
Yeah.
Because I know, like, yeah, we sit right here. Yeah. But it was useful, we used to have that.
Is that something you could look at, Mr. Martin?
We could look to see if Thrill Share, it just doesn't tie in the weave us the same way, but I mean, we can look at options that we could potentially use to offer service of that nature.
I know that the school messenger became a little bit of a problem when we were going through COVID, and it didn't, you know, it wasn't. It was-
Therefore, why they told me to turn it off.
So we haven't used it since COVID?
When we moved, I'm just trying to think what year that was. That was 2020. I'm trying to think with Thrill Share. Might have been the next year. So 21, 22, I believe, was when Aptitude came in.
Well, when I know from my own personal experience as a parent that had a high schooler at that time that would skip class, and I got called in as a parent for a student skipping class, that system was really beneficial in me nailing it ahead of getting the calls from like the principal. And so I think we should definitely look back into it.
Yeah, because also, now that we don't have the calls, kids will skip XYZ period and their parents won't know because they have on their homeroom that they're there, whereas before, you skip XYZ period, you get a call home, and like, that's like, because if they have that, they're already there, that no matter what they do is being an automated thing, they're not gonna do it much.
Well, I think
It's easier now to skip and easier now to not attend school if their parents don't even know.
I think it just speaks to what Mr. Kisner said. This is an easy, yes, it costs money, but it's a tax solution to get the parents and kids that are going to care.
And then it'll free up
Right?
the
I
resources
mean-
for you guys.
Well, I'm just saying.
At the high school, though, if Mr. Seymour, if I'm correct, teachers should be taking attendance each period, which would be noted in Schoology, which parents have access to, correct?
That the parents have access to, but it's not actively sending them a message. I mean, I don't go into.
True.
They don't take attendance in Schoology. We do it directly to Levis now.
So then a parent wouldn't have access to it.
Levis and Schoology don't talk to one another on attendance.
You can't push
So
it
we
back
put
the
it
other way.
directly in Levis, so the teachers don't have to do it twice.
But Thrill Share has the ability to set up groups, right?
Yes.
Now, again, I've never seen it, I have no idea what time consumption is, but I mean, like, if in some way, every morning, those that were absent, the K through 8's simpler than the per class at the high school, but if every one of those is just added to the list that day your kid missed or whatever, even if it came out 2 or 3 days later, now again, maybe you say, well, the way it's set up, it's very time consuming. To add 100 kids, it's gonna be, 2 hours. That's not worth it, so I don't disagree there. But I have no idea. I don't have any idea what's on the back end. Again, I think we should automate whatever we're legally mandated to make sure that we're doing, to document that we did what we have to do. People who, again, if I understand correctly, the people who respond are not the time consumers, are not the people that we're spending tons of salaries on. It's the ones that aren't, that we're trying to figure out by calling grandmas and aunts, where did they move to, who are they staying with, or that the parents are not responding and never respond, and even if you knock on the door, they won't answer it. I mean, those are the ones that I think that are taking the time. You can lead the horse to water.
We can look at potential, whether Thrill Share has that capability. If not, we could look at what type of cost point we'd be looking at for a program that would tie in automatically to Weavis.
Mr. Tatum.
We're at the mercy, though, I would say sometimes too, is if we have good data in there. Unfortunately, a lot of our truancy parents are not great about maintaining contact information, so a lot of times those calls go on. But we can certainly look at that as an option for the board's review.
The only thing I was gonna ask separately, I'm sorry, Mr. Huggins, but I had this as a separate thing, just to ask you about, Mr. Martin, at the end on everything, but when we look at that, can we look at something, is there anything that we've ever looked at to automate attendance in high school? We're in a 43-minute period, everybody's got an ID or a badge, like, is there something they can scan as they go through the door? Is there something that, that their computer, that when they're there, that the teacher can send out a thing and everybody clicks okay? Something that can automate this to take this off of the teacher's burden.
We have in CT already, we have a punch card system for like, because it's supposed to be business ready classes, so for example, in Mrs. Daft's room, there's like, if you're in the business management class, you have to go in and punch a card, and that, we have those things, if we could possibly implement that.
Right. Again, I'm just looking, again, for something, if we're gonna invest, if we invest in something technologically that can actually replace and add time back to the teaching, it's gonna take money, but I'm just asking if we've ever looked at that. I don't know if we've ever looked at the possibility of that or not.
Nah, but we could look at what possibilities exist there. In terms of Weavis, the class sessions are in, it's not a tip, I've subbed, and it's not a real time-consuming process, but,
One problem we have with badge or something, I can just take my friend's badge and scan it for them.
Well, I don't disagree with that. The teachers still have to do, when the teacher has the kids doing something as simple as writing their names, they have to do a count. Like, I have 24 that showed up but there's only 23 in the classroom. again, I'm hoping teachers know their class well enough, and even a 30 student, that they can pretty quickly say, okay, so-and-so. And that's a whole different thing. Now we've
If you
added-
got a second, I'll show you a typical process a teacher, if they had to put it in the weave, is what they would have to do.
Okay. But again, if we had if it automatically takes it, again, hopefully, when we're looking at these other solutions, it can automatically kick off that text or call to the contact on hand. Your kid did not show up for this class, or this period, or this day, and if the teachers do it in your K through 8 as the first thing in the morning, again, if we can, I don't know if there's a solution out there. I just was asking if we've ever looked into it, and if we're gonna look into this anyways as something that might auto do these calls, if we can kill two birds with one stone. Thank you.
Mr. Tatham said you've answered his question well enough, so go ahead with your, I want to keep us on track a little bit, but it's important everybody understands what you're talking about.
Absolutely. In addition to looking into that, I have been looking into automated parent notes so that they're not all in the bottom of the book bags, which, like different counties use different programs. And I think there's one that would really work well for us. So I need to look into that one more and get a quote for that one as well. Just so that we're working on that. We actually I worked closely with Darla Moyers to try and get one with what we had existing. But the piece to it that never worked was a parent would have to have a K-12 account in order to attach a note. So they could have done just the parent excuse on forms, but we couldn't add that extra piece, which is one of the things that's needed desperately. So we will be working on those. Okay, so McKinney-Vento, this year we have a new McKinney-Vento director at the state level, and she has been working closely with us, with all of us, all 55 counties, but she's worked closely with me to figure out what the process needs to be. We had worked very closely with our McKinney-Vento person before who was there, but she had some updates for us. So we are sitting right now at, I think, 54 students in the county who are identified. Because of the process, we had to unidentify some students. And so we've been contacting parents and making sure that all these are accurate. So we have a very accurate number of 54 McKinney-Vento students. Any questions about that? Okay. Student support services team we meet monthly to work together toward our common goals. We have gone on different conferences. They are all going to be on their way to Charleston at the end of the month after Thanksgiving for the Student Supports Conference. Many of them will be. There's a couple that have chosen to go to a different conference later on in the year. We've been to just a number of different conferences. We've worked with a number of different organizations in our community to provide different things for our students. We provided the backpacks that we received from a number of different organizations and churches, especially Chestnut Ridge Church has just taken us under their wing and partnered together with us. And so we had all the backpacks. I'm sure you guys remember the 150 backpacks that were back there waiting for them to go to kids for a while. So we got them out to students through the student support team. We're currently working on Christmas, and the counselors and student support at each school are spearheading that process. They know their kids and families better than anyone else, and they know who is in need. There will be a Christmas meal distribution that comes from Chestnut Ridge Church, as well as a winter coat drive in association with Chestnut Ridge Church that we're working with them. And then quarterly, the Homeless Student Coalition provides hygiene bags that we distribute to students. Communities and schools, we meet every Friday for 4 hours so that they can work on their data requirements for their positions, And then once a month, we have a more formal meeting. A lot of times, we also have a new regional specialist who is Brittany Hopkinson. She either joins us in person or joins us by Teams. And all of our students, success liaisons in communities and schools have improving attendance as one of their goals. So that makes it so that we can really focus and continue to try to move forward with that. We currently have over 150 new homeschool students this year that I continue to work on, and then our Hope Scholarship students, we have approximately 50 Hope Scholarship students.
50 or 15?
50.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Schaefer? Okay, thank you.
I have one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I was going off this sheet, that's all.
I know. I put it on something separate. The board had asked for some information about the expulsion process. And I worked with Mr. Martin to, I need a second one for back there. Here you go. So when a student who does not have an IEP, a 504 plan, or is in the SAT process, commits a level 4 offense, they are referred by their principal to the superintendent for expulsion. So then one of two things happens. Either the expulsion plan is created because that student, the offense that was committed was a violent or weapons-related offense, or for a student who was previously on an expulsion diversion plan and has reoffended, usually about the same thing. So an expulsion plan is created for that student, or if the student has a first-time offense that's not violent, not weapons-related, that student has an expulsion diversion plan created. At that point, I contact the parents and guardians, and a meeting is set up to review the plan. We just sit down around the table and I go over everything with them. I review the entire process. I explain the 2 questions that they're asked in an expulsion diversion or expulsion meeting. What will happen? I answer any questions that they have. I make sure to tell them what will happen if they do something else when they're on an expulsion diversion plan. And then we hold the hearing before the Preston County Board of Education, and then the board votes to approve the recommendation or not approve it and expel. At that point, the student follows their plan. I communicate with all the stakeholders, whoever that may be, if it's at the high school, all the counselors, the administration, the teachers, all of those things. I communicate with them. I make sure that if there are special circumstances or concerns, that we bring it back to the board for guidance. And then at various times throughout the duration of the plan, I check in, usually with the teachers, counselors, administration, just to make sure what's going on with the student, that they're succeeding, that they're doing what they need to be doing. If they're not, I have a conversation with the student, I have a conversation with the parents. I make sure that the parents have my contact information because, and they do call me, they'll call me and ask me questions about what may happen or what, if something, if they have a question or a situation that has arisen. And then right before the plan is over, I meet with them. Most of the time it's by phone, and just make sure that they know what's happening, that it's the end of the plan, that this is what the next step's going to be, and I just do whatever it takes to move them back into wherever they're headed next, which may be, like if they're in AEP, sometimes they're going to stay in there for a period or 2 because they found success there. If they're moving back into the regular classroom, then I talk to their counselors and we set up a new schedule for them, those kinds of things. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell. And then on the next page, the considerations that I take when I'm determining placement, I usually speak with Mr. Martin and Mrs. Varner about what they think the best plan is. I usually come up with a suggestion, and I take into consideration their grades, their attendance, previous discipline. I have conversations with the administration, with teachers, with the student support team. I talk to families, because a lot of times the family has a very specific idea about what they would like to see happen, and just transportation needs. So all of those things are things that I take into consideration when we create a software diversion plan. Like for instance, in the last year, we've had students who did really well working remotely or working virtually. We had students who didn't do well working remotely or working virtually, so we needed to come up with a different plan for them. And then for this school year, since we now have evening AEP up and running, they would come to school Monday through Thursday for 2 hours. We try to get them transportation from the buses coming back to the high school. And then the activity buses are available going home. There are 2 adults in the room at all times, either 2 certified teachers or a certified teacher and instructional assistant. Mrs. Kelly offered courseware as a plan for curriculum, and I think that that's been working really well over the last week or so. And then the possibility of being, for them to be able to work remotely if we have court orders or board direction or some other determination that makes it so that they physically can't be there in the building. Administration, I put out to everyone involved a list of administration who's available for support if they need it. There's about 10 people on there, so they have a lot of support if they need it. And then the idea is that the student has 45 successful school days of attendance, which is essentially a term, a 9-week term. And in order to get credit for being there, they have to make sure they're completing assignments, they have to be respectful, they have to be on time, they have to continue to work, those kinds of things. And it could be fewer days, depending on the student needs. Like if the student came in at a particular time and it works well for them to go back in at the semester or something like that, like one of the cases we've had recently, it may be fewer days than that, but the idea is the 45 successful school days. And then at that point, we have a meeting to determine exactly where they're headed next. And then the goal is to get them back into AEP daytime, and then Mr. Martin can work his magic, and then they earn the possibility of being out. Any questions about the expulsion process?
Any questions?
Mrs. Schaefer, though, thank you for pulling that together. I think that gives much greater clarity to the processes.
Yep, thank you. Okay, we appreciate it. Next on the agenda at this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the meeting minutes from 10/23/23.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
The next on the agenda is the minutes from 11/9 special meeting. Those will be on our next agenda for approval. So moving on, next on the agenda, Mr. Martin, Superintendent's update.
Okay. Board members, in your packets, you should have received three documents, actually. The weekly superintendent's update that's emailed to all employees. In addition to, I've just given you a general update, and then I do have information as it pertains to our enrollment, comparative enrollment from last year to this year. So as we look at the superintendent's update, a few things, obviously today's meeting is noted. Tomorrow, or on Wednesday, we have a principals meeting at 8:30 here in the boardroom. In addition to that, we have a number of educators where I can't go in and state anything officially, but we anticipate a number of local educators will be recognized by Your Community Foundation at a grant award celebration at Morgantown on Wednesday. Our next board meeting will actually take place at Kingwood Elementary. That will include Kingwood Elementary and Central Preston's Local School Improvement Council, along with their curriculum team presentations. That meeting will take place at Kingwood Elementary. Mrs. Peasley has not indicated the location of that meeting yet. I don't know if that'll be in the cafeteria, gym, computer lab. I'm sure we will find out, and I will let the board and the public know. I will be meeting with faculty senate reps at the end of the month. We do have a number of central office officials who will be attending the WVASA conference at Stonewall Jackson Resort. And then our singular board meeting will take place in December at the Fellows School. That will be both the Fellows and Roseburg local school improvement councils and curricular teams. Front page, of course, that notes the accomplishment of our transportation department that was noted earlier in today's meeting. Some other information supplied to the staff. And board members, this might be applicable to you as well. If you have not set up your multi-factor authentication on your email accounts, K-12 email accounts will not be able to be accessed off campus. They will only be able to, until you get that established. If you have not done so already, you'd have to establish why you're connected here at the school network. Mrs. Schaefer did provide an update on the CPS referral form process. And I did want to call to attention, the state is really pushing a new tutoring product at no cost for students that's available from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's called tutorwestvirginia.com. So we want to continue to publicize that to our students as a possibility. As Mr. Huggins alluded to earlier, our schools really stepped up and did a tremendous job with their Veterans Day programs last week. These are shots from several of our district schools. I think the pictures that are included in your packets took place at Brewston, Terralta, West, Preston, Fellows,ville, Roseburg, South Preston. I know that, again, I think every school had a program. The schools did a tremendous job with that, and I just think it's highly, highly important that we, recognize our veterans on an annual basis, and I'm always so pleased to see how our schools step up and do a great job with that. Okay, jumping over to my update, the second month enrollment data that was certified back in October, I've provided you with a comparative data update. So this is going to show basically our second month enrollment comparative to this year to last year. Overall, just some generalities pulled from that data. The district has seen a decrease in enrollment at 8 of 10 schools. We've seen increases at Kingwood and Roseburg. Overall decrease in enrollment compared to last year is 138.725. The 0.725 is, board members, we don't like divide kids up, but in some instances, we're only able to fractionally count a student's enrollment depending upon maybe the number of periods in which they're attending. This also happens quite a bit with our pre-K students, that we only get a fractional portion of the total student FTE evaluation. This loss of enrollment will require several position cuts and does not include position cuts related to the loss of ESSER and levy-based positions. I know in speaking with Mrs. Varner, in looking collectively at everything, it's going to be a substantial number of cuts both in the service and professional ranks in order to stay within our budgetary marks. If you want to actually take a look at the enrollments, you can see the level, the chart that's in your packet again is going to show you by grade level the number of students. You're going to see the total FTE evaluation for each school below that graph. Then you're going to see the increase or decrease compared to this year versus last year. Probably our largest drop, the high school lost approximately 62 students. West Preston lost approximately 20 students. Brewston lost approximately 34 students. We saw very marginal losses at some of the Aurora School lost about 2 students. Roseburg picked up 5. I mean, the one thing I will say is some of the losses of students were a little bit lesser than what we saw last year. Last year, we lost approximately 150 students, but over a 2-year span, that is a substantial loss in students, obviously. So I hate to provide this data, but the data is what it is at this point. We obviously need to continue to try to improve to serve as the best option for both homeschool or potential Hope Scholarship students. We want them obviously to be here at Preston County Schools. So if you have any questions about the attendance data, board members, again, I just wanted to make sure you received that today. Our next scheduled levy committee meeting is going to be scheduled for Tuesday, November 28th at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. As I said earlier, we'll have several teachers recognized at the Your Community Foundation Fund Award Ceremony. Veritas is updated again. There have been delays in materials. They are telling us they will give us a 2-week lead time when they begin substantial work in the concourse area.
I'm assuming they're not starting this week?
No, sir. Veritas has also provided work update, or they've also begun initial work at the West Preston project, in which they'll be constructing concession stand, hooking on near the stage cafeteria area of the school. In addition, they'll be completed adding doors in the pod-style classrooms in the lower elementary section. I know they have a lay-down materials area out there. They've had to move the dumpsters from one side of the building to the other. It has impacted the food delivery aspects, because that's where a lot of the construction will be going on. But they'll say that project will take several months, but they will be able to concurrently work while school's in session. The work on the doors will have to be evening shift type work. They won't be able to do that during the academic day, obviously. As some of you drove in, you probably saw we do have a roofing vendor on site. Mansueto is now on site at Preston High School. They actually made repairs to sections of the roof over towards the concourse and gym area. But in addition, they're going to be working on sections of the 9th grade edition, in which they'll be removing rooftop units, replacing the roof, and actually pulling off the old units, resetting the new units, and then our maintenance staff will be hooking those units back up. Mrs. Varner, I don't know if you have anything from a personnel standpoint you'd like to offer to the board at this time?
We received our email from the State Department that our certified list has been approved. So at the next board meeting, I will give you guys a breakout of all of our certified list information. At the next board meeting, last Wednesday, we met as a county staff briefly and went over the numbers for personnel for next school year. I began working with Mr. Science. We kind of took our chart that I have and started putting in just numbers for required positions that we know we have to have based off of, so like in elementary, I know I can go up to 25 in this classroom, I can go up to 28 in this classroom. So I took the number of students that I know as of right now that are enrolled, and I started trying to plug in numbers and positions only. And we started going through the county. So I'm starting that process of, okay, I know I need this many positions, this is where we're at. We are gonna set a meeting up so like I can meet with Brenda and Katie and Laura and everyone up here and say, okay, this is how many positions you guys funded last year, how many can we still fund for the following year? We only go by positions, we never go by names of anybody until we know where we are, and then we'll start that tedious process of going back and starting the rest of the transfers. So, in December, my goal is to meet with principals before Christmas, and then by beginning of February, I'll start passing out letters for rest and transfers. So that is about where we are with that. As of now, the numbers are 21 professionals and 26 service cuts that we're going to have to make. That is due to the Easter money going away, the levy positions that we have to take out, and then the cuts due to the number of enrollment.
All right, thank you for the update, Mrs. Varner. I wish we had better news on that, but that's, again, that is the update that we've got. Board members, that's all I have at this time.
Any questions for the superintendent?
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
do you think maybe looking at talking with Mr. Martin with AEP and then the people in charge of the evening AEP. But this tutorwestvirginia.com sounds like something that, especially the students that are only getting 2 hours a night, like there should be no reason a student comes the following day after they had this hour where they could ask questions to help them with work that they're doing in their evenings and stuff. Like this should be potentially part of the agreement, like that students will utilize this. I don't know if we want to mandate some amount of it. I assume those kids get some homework with only being there for 2 hours.
Certainly, it could be a great resource, but in the fact that the hours are available during the course of the instructional day when they're not coming in until later. So we can certainly encourage that is a prospective resource for
I
students
don't
in
know
those
exactly where it
circumstances.
fits, but to me, this is something the state's paying
It's
for.
a great resource,
Let's
yeah.
utilize it. And I
Sure.
don't know if we make it mandatory or what, but again, students should not be coming the next day with their first thing being, I didn't know how to do this problem, if they haven't called this number or done,
Sure.
done something to reach out on this, so.
Yeah, I think we can definitely encourage the use of that, and hopefully that will alleviate some of those issues, questions that might come up in an afternoon session.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on. This time entertain a motion for the board to approve the service personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion?
I have a question. There's a position on here on the service personnel that I think conflicts with the professional. There's a person a resignation that's hiring for a new position, so we'd be hiring it before we approve the resignation. I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Often we've had those concurrently cross on board agendas. I mean, I guess technically we could hold off on that one if you feel that there's some reason that we wouldn't accept the resignation on the professional agenda. But I think that was more so being done so we didn't have the long wait time until the next meeting.
Okay, are we okay to go ahead with that, or do we need to flip them?
Can we flip them, even though we've approved the agenda? Can we still just take them?
No,
We do
I don't think
professional
we
first?
can. Yeah, you can change the order, you just can't add or or you can take away, like, if it's not there, we can add. So we could.
Mr. President, I move that we table the service personnel agenda until after the professional agenda is voted on.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded to table. Any discussion? None? Do we have to vote on that?
Yeah. you may want to-
Okay, voice vote?
Yes.
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 Hold on, Mr. Huggins.
Yes, sir. I didn't think of that. Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so at this time, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the professional agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or discussion?
I request executive session for legal and personnel issues.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to go in executive session on professional personnel for a legal issue dealing with personnel. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, this also will be a verbal vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. And it is
11:58.
11:58. None called for the vote, voice vote again.
Yes.
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 Yes, at 12:21.
21.
So don't forget to do that. There was nothing done except Mr. Martin and Ms. Varner explained legal issues as far as hiring professional personnel. Okay, so we have moved in a second on professional personnel. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Now to go back, at this time, I'll entertain a motion for the board to approve the service personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr., did I do that wrong? Moved by Mr. Tatham. Good. Second by Ms. Feathers. I'm looking at Mr. Kisner, make sure I did that
Got that
correctly.
look on his face.
Just untable.
I don't know, Ms. Varner. We had the motion, we tabled the motion, so we had a proper motion and second, and we tabled. I don't see any reason not to proceed with what you're doing, but that's why my mind is, I'm trying to process. So
Okay,
we're just, so it's not actually the motion, it's the motion to bring it off the table, is what that motion was then.
okay. Thank you both.
Wait a minute, are we voting on the actual agenda, or are we voting to take it off?
No, we're,
All right, hold on, then, I need to change that.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I
It's
was
okay.
trying to.
That's okay, that's why I look for help. I count on you guys to keep us straight. I
We
put
really
my,
should make the FFA students stay. I'll know it better than I
yeah, but they may get me really in trouble. You know what you're dealing with.
Hold on, Mr. Evans, so that was by Mr. Tatham, seconded by Mrs. Feathers, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And then this will be a voice vote as well. Wait till he tells us.
Okay.
Okay,
yes.
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 Okay.
Now, since we took it off the table, the other motion was there to begin with. So now we're just, are there any questions or discussion about the service personnel motion? Hearing none, now call for the vote.
Wait a minute, is that still Mr. Tatham followed by Mrs. Feathers?
Now it was back to the original one.
Whoever did it before we, crap.
Okay, do you want us just to? I don't
I'll fix it,
remember.
I'll watch the, I don't remember who it was.
I
but
didn't
I'll
write
watch-
it down.
I'll watch the video and fix it.
The original was you? And who's second?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'll
second by
double
Ms.
check that.
Phillips.
Okay.
Okay, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
Really, we just want to try to make your life difficult, Mr. Board.
There's ones where there's lots of motions, it makes the minutes interesting.
I couldn't resist.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda is parental contact discussion. Mr. Martin.
Yes, board members. So back at the October 9th meeting, Mr. Kisner had brought up an item for discussion related to possible protocols for parental contact requirements when a student is removed from the regular classroom setting. He expressed a belief that parents should be informed in advance of their children being permitted to attend things such as assemblies, hear guest speakers, attend counseling sessions, visit the nurse, attend in-day tutoring sessions, retaking of tests, disciplinary matters, and other reasonings. Those were just a few. In review of the district policy manual, there does not appear to be any current policies related to such communications. At the conclusion of the discussion, it was decided to bring this issue back to the board after receiving feedback from the Principals Association. There were 4 questions that were posed, which have been provided at our previous agenda. I've attached files with responses from, I believe, 5 administrators. I'll get the other 5. Likely should have those on the 15th as well. But these are available. One was from a single principal, the other were, I believe, 4 additional principals. So the principals could speak freely. I did mark off the school in which they were representing because I felt it was important that the principals be able to speak freely to the matter. So those attachments were provided for the board's review, so I would open up for any further discussion that the board members would like to have.
I appreciate these, thank you. I think we'll wait, or personally, I think when we have all the feedback as far as things go, I think that'd be, just for the, well, again, it's.
I'll return this,
relevant.
I'll return this to the agenda and I'll make sure that I have the other responses at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
just as far as having their full ones there, and then we can go through full comment and whatnot.
Okay.
Anybody else? One just quick comment, tell them thank you, because again, I think this is the line of communication. I also agree by blacking the names out. I think that gives the anonymity and the confidence to really say what you think. I think that's important. Next on the agenda, recommend the board to approve the excess levy proposal for placement on the May 14, 2024 ballot on the first read and the possible final approval to be considered on 11/27/23.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion about the levy?
I think it should be pointed out that the rate that people pay is decreasing from 10.55% down to 9.67%. I mean, it's an important message. So overall, I mean, that's because of mostly the valuation of property in the county has increased, primarily like commercial property. So in essence, people will be paying a little bit less, if I understand that
Yes.
correctly, for the average residential homeowner.
Yes. One thing, Mr. Huggins, I would like to commend the efforts of the levy committee. We've had anywhere between usually 20 to 25 attending most of the meetings with individuals from throughout the county. I think they've provided great feedback through the development of the levy call. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Kerstetter for her efforts in pulling the draft version that's before you at this time. I know she's done a substantial amount of work on that front, so we appreciate your efforts, Katrina, as well. So.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
This is noted as being on the first read. Could you just, for informative purposes, give, like, what comes next?
And Katrina, you might need to help me a little bit on this, but this first read is simply, you're basically approving the term, the rate, the amount, and the approximate verbiage that's anticipated for the levy call. This will require Katrina, I think, to do to basically, to confer with legal counsel to be sure the legal jargon is everything that's.
We'll input into the actual document that will actually be on the
Ballot.
which is a multi-page document with the rates included in a bunch of all legal things. And then after that is once over by the attorney, it will come back to you in its full capacity to be voted on.
So the hope is, if we can have it ready by the 27th, that's wonderful. If not, then we would have this on the December agenda. I know that we have to have it to the county commission by, I believe they gave us a deadline of February 6th. So, we feel like we're in good shape in terms of the approval. If it's the will of the board to approve this resolution, we're in a good place in terms of timeline to progress our levy call through county government as well.
So let me start out with, I had the opportunity to go to the meetings. I made it to the first one, Mr. Tatham, and then I've had conflicts just about every other one except for that Ms. Feathers has been to. So not to make you rehash anything, but what do we have a response to? Last year we went drastically over in some of our schools on the money that they had available for using busing for athletics so when we say that we're going down, we're taking our rate down. And asking for less money through the levy. How do we respond to parents who say, well, you went over last year for what we needed for this busing thing, so why did you bring the rate down instead of keeping it up so that you were able to provide the better budget for that?
I think Mr. Martin has a good answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, ultimately, the overall rate that a typical taxpayer is going to go down. There have been reallocations in each of those levy item funds, and of course, the trip allocation has actually been increased compared to our current call. So there are targeted areas where we've looked at where we've needed to make increases. You have to look at inflationary trends as well. Of course, we ran this levy back in 2019. Obviously, over 5 years, the cost of everything. So, for example, we had budgeted $650,000 for teaching salaries, for example, back in the call in 2019. The current allocation, Katrina, calls for, I believe, $950,000. We've tended to shift more resources to that fund because, we had to look at it from a committee and really as a central office team, in the fact that, Mrs. Varner alluded to earlier, we're looking at 20-plus potential cuts that when you take into consideration the levy, the ESSER funded positions, and our loss of enrollment. So, these positions would be absolutely vital to the operation of the school district, but we've chosen to increase that budget so we can purchase some additional potential positions there. And then we also have to take into consideration those positions are going to run higher than they did 5 years ago. And we had to look collectively at each fund. There were some line items that we reduced. There were some that we increased, and we tried to look at, that's why I would certainly commend Mrs. Kerstetter trying to look back historically as to where we've, spent, larger allocate. We could only spend the amount, obviously, that's allocated to the specific fund, but in terms of There were some funds where we have not spent as heavily, and those have to be maintained in that levy line item fund. They have to be rolled into the next year, for example. But some were more aggressively spent, I guess, than others, and we tried to take that into consideration of the development of the levy call.
Thank you very much.
And I think, I'm not sure if you fully added, but overall, this levy call will provide a little bit more money. That's
correct.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I understood that.
More funding, but again, the typical taxpayer is going to see a decreased rate in terms of their individual tax because of the expansion of the tax base.
Right, and then there was a lot of discussion, I assure you, on what do we do? Do we put it here? Do we put it there? We went in a lot of different directions. I think for anyone who's not been intimately involved in it, in essence, this is a supplemental levy that fills in gaps here and there, but a big portion of it is for maintenance of the buildings.
Sure.
And it's things that are vital and necessary. In the previous levy call, a lot of that money went towards HVAC systems. It went to roofing repairs, but only at a few schools. And it went to paving projects at a few schools. So, I mean, the maintenance needs of the county are unending and will never end. So, I mean, this levy, in essence, continues in that same path of primarily, I mean, half of it's going towards maintenance of maintaining the 9 structures. And then on the other half of the levy, it's just filling in gaps and holes that there's not a dedicated funding source for.
Right.
And
I
we
think
had a
that-
lot of discussion about should we or should we not be doing that, and how come we're not taking like all of the money and putting it into education, et cetera.
Right, right. And I think it's important for the public to know, again, from my understanding, it's very hard to get federal money for repairs and maintenance. You've got to come up with that in other ways. Like they do a lot of help when it comes to building or replacing, but the repairs and maintenance, that's really the most important, that's the hardest thing from my understanding and history of getting. So the levy is vitally important in that maintenance that you don't understand, well, why they're just getting rid of a school and putting up another one.
One reason that we've kept a substantial total in the maintenance fund is certainly what Mr. Tatham attributed to, but also that gives us the ability to potentially use levy-based funding to leverage school building authority projects and things of that nature. By being able to bring some money towards those projects, it certainly enhances our opportunities to be potentially funded for those projects. We can also look at the same concept and work with Mr. Smittle, for example. We'll have a lot of Homeland Security grant opportunities, again, where if we can bring a certain amount of funding to those projects, you're typically more apt to receive stronger consideration for, outside funding. So it really can, in that aspect, can kind of grow our money.
And I think it's important with the SBA. I read an article within the last couple of weeks, the amount of money that they have, they're going to legislatures to ask for more because the amount of money that they traditionally put per square foot doesn't cover it.
It doesn't.
So if
It's
you don't
tough.
have any money to add to it, it's way short.
Well, and that's even through our building projects through the bond. Unfortunately, everything that we would have wanted in all these projects, we weren't able to do absolutely everything within these projects because, as you said, Mr. Huggins, we pass a bond and then over 5 years have to build all these projects. Well, year 5, you've seen them. Now, you tried to build in, obviously, certain buffers within those funds, but it's, the type of inflationary trends we've seen over the last several years, it's just tough to budget for.
Okay, anything else? Again, Mr. Tatham, thank you for representing the board each of those meetings.
Mrs. Feathers and Mrs. Kisner.
Ms. Feathers,
Thank you,
Mr.
guys.
Kisner, and Ms. Kerstetter. It sounds like the 4 of you have
And
put in.
Margot also has attended a couple of
Okay,
meetings
good,
as well.
Margo. I didn't know that. And the reason, Margo, in case you wondered why only some are there, if 3 of us are there, we can't be. That's why there's
Quorum.
only 2 at a time. Okay, so that's why you haven't seen me, because we have people that were going to be there. So I want to thank you for doing that as well. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the revisions of Preston County Schools Policy 12-5 on second reading for final approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Thank you.
Voting is open.
I can say that without out loud. Just makes sense.
Yeah. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the updated updated Preston County School Policy R8-39-9, which is retired teachers as substitute in areas of critical need, on a second read for final approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Kisner. I just about did it again. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the submitted educational leave request.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for a board to approve the attached out-of-state field trips. This includes trip to out of East Preston to the zoo, a trip to out of East Preston to Carnegie and Kennywood, a trip to out of East Preston, Carnegie, trip Brewston Elementary School to the zoo, and a trip Brewston Elementary School for their band.
And it should be noted, go ahead.
No, go.
I say many of these trips are funded by the excess levy.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatum. Any questions or discussion?
Just to build off what Mr. Martin said, that they're levy funded, I would request that the levy funded poster that we have, the red posters be in on each of the school, each of the buses. And for Ms. Ryan, if you can please do Facebook post for each of these trips and make sure that it's tagged with the levy funding. If you can use the bright red border that we've used, if you need like colors or anything like that for it, that I can get that for you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the attached chaperone list for Kingwood Elementary and club chaperones at Aurora School.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the submitted out-of-state professional meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any discussion? Only comment again, Ms. Kerstetter, thank you for representing us. Call for the vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
We do expect an extensive presentation on the aquarium.
It's been a lot of work for Katrina this year. I think she has to coordinate all the state level trainings for the group, so it's a lot of work. So.
That's why it'll be an extensive training for us now. Moving on. ongoing literacy discussion. Mr. Martin.
Sure, Mr. Huggins. Just wanted to update, and speaking with Mrs. McDonald, she had helped to coordinate literacy kickoff event with all K-5 staff that took place on the Professional Development Day back in October, or back on Friday, October 27th. Principals were provided a similar training on 11/6. I believe they did that training over at Preston Memorial Hospital. Survey data was carried out at both events and will be assessed by members of the county literacy team. I think, Katie, you guys had worked through those survey results last week. Trying to break it out, though. Yeah. The county literacy team has been meeting consistently. They've been meeting twice a month to assist with various county literacy initiatives. So, again, just in keeping this current, we will continue to keep this as a agenda item, Mr. Huggins.
Any questions?
Yeah, I want some questions. I don't know if for Mr. Martin or Ms. McDonald, but can you update us on what professional training is currently going on? I think, are we training on Jan Richardson's for the guided reading? And what else are we training on for curriculum?
So, yes, we still have small group instruction, the Jan Richardson training, which focuses on how to do a small group lesson plan and get to all the kids, and it's broken down by the 5 pillars of science reading. In addition to that, we're developing trainings that align with the State Department's recommendations for science and reading. So this year specifically, we're going to focus on the scope and sequence of the phonics and foundational skills, as well as high frequency words. And then starting probably in the summer, we're going to be doing some of the other components, which would be comprehension strategies, fluency, kind of the next step. So because we don't have much PD time left this year, what we're doing is we're developing sessions that will be able to be done at the PLCs at the school level. So instead of bringing teachers in and trying to get subs, our coaches are going to develop a training that's the literacy team is going to develop a training that several of us will be able to go and do. So we'll have smaller groups of teachers going through that during PLC time instead of like a whole county, whole group session, just because it's hard for us to pull that off right now.
Are we training on any of the other curriculums yet, like such as like foundations or NIHouse? Any of the other ones that are listed on there?
Foundations, Preston is doing a training for foundations. They have several new people using it. I don't have a county coordinated training for that, but I am funding it. So like for the schools that wrote that into their literacy plan, they want to make sure, because they want to give more teachers that program, we are training, but it's not countywide at the moment. Aurora, all K3 is using foundations, but none of the teachers are new to it, so they didn't need any training for it. NIHouse, the only training I've done so far is the dyslexia course, which was an optional. We offered that in the summer, and I had 35 people take that course, and we'll continue to offer that. It's a digital course that teachers can do anytime through their platform. And then I know some special education teachers have also had more extensive NIHouse training with it being used more as an intervention tool.
Yeah, Mrs. McGraw, I was going to note with special ed, they were running into the same problems. They had some in-person training scheduled, and we were really struggling in terms from a substitute standpoint. So I know that those have been shifted to more of a self-paced virtual model comparatively.
We also have had some training in HMH or adopted reading curriculum. The last PD day we did, we had a 2-hour session in the afternoon, primarily for newer teachers that haven't been in the program before. And I'm going to work with our PD contact with them to do coaching with them. So again, instead of pulling teachers out, we're going to send HMH staff into the buildings to make it more personalized instead of, because they our teachers are pretty good at the platform. It's like the more nuanced things of like, okay, I have this specific group of kids with specific need, how do I use your program to meet their needs? So that's where we're going to go the coaching route for that program.
Yeah, I think my concern is, and it's similar to what I have my email that I sent to you on July 11th, when we just had South Preston and Aurora's curriculum plans, and South Preston had put Jan Richardson as their very first bullet point, but Aurora did not have Jan Richardson on their curriculum plan. Is Jan Richardson, is that considered an approved curriculum?
Approved.
Or is it is that a foundational curriculum that we're using for literacy?
No, it's more of a structure.
Okay.
So like, it's kind of like, it's a lesson plan basically. It's a program that shows teachers how with this, for 15 minutes, how do I hit every one of the pillars? So it's not like, it doesn't provide the text that the kids are using. It's a structure for the teachers to figure out how to be the most efficient as possible with their time in small groups. So it's not really a curriculum. It's more of a structure, and similar to like a jigsaw is an instructional strategy. This is more of an instructional strategy, like a protocol for teaching.
Okay. Because my concern is like, again, I don't think I got a specific answer back from you, but on July 11th, I emailed and said, Jan Richardson is based off of guided reading. How does this align with structured literacy, which is what we're supposed to, science of reading, is where we're moving to. And like, even if you type into Google, does Jan Richardson align with science of reading? The very first thing that pops up is the science of reading practices shy away from popular guided reading approach touted by Lucy Calkins and Jan Richardson in favor of an explicit focus on decoding and language comprehension. So I can understand if we're using Jan Richardson for small group, and we're using this as a structure, that's fine, but we still need to be using that core curriculum that is breaking out a systematic way for teaching the words, and that would be Nyhouse, right, or Foundations?
Yeah, it's like, we have different resources for each component of the reading block. So part of that, the way we talk about science of reading is there's two buckets of instruction. There's instruction that's skill-based, like kids actually being able to decode a word, and then there's instruction that's comprehension knowledge-based. So things like, if they're reading a book about whales, as a kid, you've never seen a whale. Do we know what we're talking? Are we talking about an animal that lives on the farm or in the ocean? That kind of knowledge content based.
So that's more Jan Richardson for that one, then, right?
Jan Richardson is the skill based. So kids are coming to the table. These kids are getting tier 1 instruction, but they're still missing these holes. That's kind of where our ESG comes in. So they work with texts that fit the needs of, let's say, silent E is an easy one to understand. So if these kids are trying to figure out how to use silent E and how that affects reading, the teacher has texts and activities to practice that skill at the table. So the content stuff is what happens on grade level, which science of reading says every single kid needs to have on grade level text, and that's what's happening whole group. If our teachers are picking a theme for the week or the month, like this month is Under the Sea is an easy one to picture. All the books we're reading stories and we're reading informative texts that are on second grade level for everybody about the ocean. Then at the table with Jan Richardson, it's how to break down with those 4 kids in that small group, how do we get them their instruction on exactly the skills that they need. So it's very complicated. The big difference that we need to look at between science of reading and like the guided reading and like the kind of antiquated methods is the books that we're choosing. Because what science of reading doesn't want us to do is just say this kid is a level D and they're only going to see level D books. That's a big no-no. So we have to make sure when our teachers are using a structure like Jan Richardson that they're picking the right materials to keep those kids moving. That's the biggest thing.
And are you confident that they're picking the correct materials for that?
We're working on it. It's something that's in every one of our trainings that we're doing and we're watching for. I talked to principals about looking for that. So I think that's one of the pieces that we need to make sure of. But I feel very confident that we understand that needs to happen, and I think we just need to keep helping people do the best they can.
Okay. Yeah, you understand where I'm coming from. My perspective is, it's a concern of mine, because originally when I ran through Aurora's their curriculum plan, Jan Richardson was not even mentioned in it. And when we got the schematic, Aurora approved their curriculum plan on July 7th, which was the date, that's the one that you gave us on July 10th. And then when we got the revised versions on August 24th for approval, lo and behold, Jan Richardson is on Aurora's plan now, but it wasn't originally. But that was a concern that I brought up, but it was on South Preston's where you have Jan Richardson, who's more, right, structured, guided reading versus structured. It can be very confusing. And by having one step in the new way and one step in the old way that we've been doing that the state's moving away from, I think could be very confusing for teachers.
The terminology is confusing, but the state is still saying we need to do small group focused instruction. And that's what the Jan Richardson is. We just have to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
Okay.
So it is very complicated. We're trying to be as clear as we can so that teachers aren't torn,
Do we have any schools that are not doing it? Based on what I saw going back over the curriculum plans, it looks like everyone is now using Jan Richardson.
So everyone is doing small group instruction, and there are definitely classrooms that aren't using that specific lesson plan, but the majority are, because it's a structure that's easy for them to follow, to make sure that they're hitting everything at the table. I'm sure we have, every teacher, every classroom is doing small group instruction, and most of them are using Jan Richardson instruction specifically.
Did Aurora want to use it originally, or were?
Yeah, I think they honestly just, because it's not a curriculum as like foundations or HMHs, I think that's why they didn't have it on there. I did not tell them to put it on there.
Okay.
I think in our conversations with the whole team and discussing all the components that they could use as part of, when we're talking about reading instruction, I think I didn't tell them to.
Okay. Thank you.
If Jan Richards is like balanced literacy, averse to science of reading, whatever. Again, I'm not even fully into the state should be telling everybody, but is there a reason to use them as the trainer for the small group instruction over something that is more science of reading? Do we just have a contract there that we're just using the rest of, or is it intentional because we feel they do a better job, or?
It's just that it's the best thing we found, and it's just important. Like, if you look at the state's documents on like do's and don'ts, like this is science of reading, this is not. Everything that we're training, it does fit with science of reading. We just had to cut out some of the practices that they've also cut as being ineffective, like the 3 viewing system, basically encouraging kids to use what they have to guess. That's out, which used to be a component of it. So they are moving with the times as well, and it's the best thing that we've seen so far. And we also have, it also comes with a lot of tools. They give us a lot of information, like our running records, all it fits together really nicely. So it's not really a contract thing, it's just what's working the best for us.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 questions. So, number one, you said earlier that the principals and all of the coaches type thing have been looking really closely that teachers provide material that is on the grade level that's supposed to be. On what basis are books told is this grade level? Is that from the manufacturer? Is that based off science of reading? Like, where do you guys get the quantification that this is a 2nd grade level and this is a 3rd? And how are teachers supposed to know when getting materials for their classroom?
So that comes from the state as far as like our learning, our state standards. So our standards say that a 3rd grader should be able to read at this Lexile level, and the books that we use tell us what Lexile level it is.
And then, so we talk about like antiquated methods and stuff. So if the books that they have been reading before are the wrong level, are the teachers provided with new books, or do they have to buy them themselves?
Yes, we just this year purchased complete sets of new books, which is one type of book that we were definitely lacking in to fit the needs of science of reading, so we purchased the codables. Yeah, we are giving them.
So the books are provided, like they have to guess. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I know it's an ongoing process, and we appreciate the work you're putting in, as well as the teachers. I don't want to leave them out. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the ongoing teacher education agreement between Preston County Schools and Fairmont State University as per the submitted letter and invoice.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the required BJE 301 through 308 for carryover financial year 23 fund balance.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the budget journal entry number 203 related to the 9/14/23 update to the state formula.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda is just information levy check report.
Yeah, Mr. Huggins, I did want to add here, this was something that was requested by Mr. Tatham. We'll run a separate levy check. There is going to be a one-meeting lag, though, because, so for example, whatever levy-based funds are approved at this meeting, we'll be able to compile a report tomorrow after those checks are run. So this actually was the group of checks that were approved at our previous board meeting. I apologize that when Mrs. Fike ran that report, sometimes they kick out a weavis and they're very hard to read. So I went ahead and took the leisure to retype that section of it because I thought it was much more legible when I typed it out.
Also, I saw it was those are two different things.
It's
Same thing, but two
it's the
different.
same information. I just thought it was very difficult to read as submitted, so I typed up that.
I'm capable of reading the bad copy. I can
Well,
figure
I
it
just think we need to make an adjustment. Probably Mr. Sines can get with Mrs. Fike on that and make an adjustment on her printer, because I don't know what was going on there, but it kind of smushed everything.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I don't need you to retype it. I mean, for me to read it, if that makes sense. Like, I can struggle through that.
I had some of the vendors, it took me a second to figure out. when
I don't want you
typing them
spending
up.
your time doing that.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for providing that.
Yes. Thank you, Finance Office. Well, thank you, Mrs. Kerstetter and Mrs. Fike.
Absolutely. And again, it's another one of those, Mr. Tatham keeps talking transparency. It just helps. Next on the agenda is information only as well, monthly financial report. Any questions on it?
I just had one question, and Ms. Kerstetter, the technology supplies, is it about 15,000%, which is on page 6? Again, some of the other ones were way out of whack as far as percentage of variation, but like if you're at $200 and it turned out it was $700, not a concern. But the technology one was significant enough that I thought, was that something that you looked into? Did it throw off alarms in your head?
At this point, we haven't really readjusted the overall budget line items for the general, which is what that is. That's nothing, we know those expenses that'll be corrected when the budget gets re-analyzed.
Okay.
It's nothing that's
There's nothing there alarming. You're saying it was an expected technology expense, it was nothing.
That one wasn't, initially it was a May set for the item budget, but it will be adjusted.
Thank you.
Desktops.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the schedule of checks to be written.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Kisner. Any questions or comments?
There's $39,000 checks to Adventure. Do we know what that is?
Mrs. Kelly, that is probably affiliated with your work with After School Explorers.
Half of us PD and the other half is, well, can I just get you that?
That's fine. And then Ford Office of Technologies, we have a bunch of entries like at each school, and it says
Desktop
884 per unit.
Desktop computers.
So it was replacing desktops at them. And then Miss Layton, did she leave? Oh, there she is. I'm sorry. I was like, she didn't leave. I didn't see. But anyways, there's a thing under yours that says docks and 3 anchors. And there's 2 entries. One's for 9,000 and one's for 7,500.
Those were from our keynote speaker this summer, and the way she billed us was 2 separate things. One was for the activities, and then I think the other was either for books or for travel expenses or something. She just had 2 separate ways of billing. But that was, it was all in one PO, but it just came in 2 separate invoices.
So you're saying it's for training people that came here and it's.
It was the one we had on the football field, the opening day of school, that
Uh-huh.
we had such like
Okay.
good feedback. It was that
Yeah.
one. It just happened.
Okay, sorry. I just, from docks and 3 anchors, I didn't know what that
It's
was.
just a weird name, like, it's just the name of her like consulting company that she has.
I'm not putting in the shipyard, I'm good.
You might need a life jacket. Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
You're on Embrace. Sorry. It's all right. Let me get through.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda is I entertain a motion for the board to approve the budget journal entries 109 through 113 and 116 through 122.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Motion, or voting is open.
Motion to adjourn.
No, not yet.
Oh, you'll be worried.
We're almost there, boys. Keep it together.
That's why you're here.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the work to be completed by the 97th Regiment of the West Virginia National Guard in conjunction with the Preston County School maintenance staff to complete the construction of a restroom near the PHS track and field complex.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or comments?
What makes this one special?
We just felt like it was because it was a project of, I mean, this is a relatively large-scale project. We felt it warranted board approval on this. We certainly appreciate the efforts. The 97th Regiment has also helped to construct a small storage building near the interior of the track. From my understanding, this building, and Mr. Seymour, you were in the meeting, it's going to be situated, though, to the right-hand side of the track, if I'm correct, where it also could potentially provide options for baseball or softball.
Yeah, it's gonna be above the baseball field, is where it's gonna go. We've talked with Mr. Murray on putting the septic tank in. He felt, that's all the Army needs, is for us to put the septic tank in, and they'll bring everything in and get her done.
Is it essentially they do the labor for free?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the benefit of.
The only thing we have to do is get the septic tank and get it buried properly, but no, we don't incur any charges with this.
Okay.
It's great service by the group, for sure.
And Sergeant Thomas is an outstanding young man.
I think we have to provide they'll do the piping and stuff, but we have to provide the urinals,
The materials, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think on the maintenance list, there's like a pole for some cameras or lights or something like in the center around that track area. I mean, is that not something that, at least while we've got the excavation equipment down there?
Yeah, we
whatever
could set
we're doing
that.
for the septic, are we looking at trying to double? get
We
all
have,
that?
we have a pole too, because we would use, if you're familiar with, when you're coming up into between the soccer fields and up towards the bus garage, the pole that the cameras are mounted to out there, we should have a similar pole that we would be able to use a pole of that nature. Now, what you run into out at the track, though, is they'll probably have to cut that pole down quite a bit to get really pretty, if you've been out of events out there, the wind is really bad. So in terms of that camera, you're going to get potentially a lot of movement with that. So we'll probably have to bring the elevation of that camera down somewhat to try to take away some of that wind shear. But Yeah, I think while we're at that, that would certainly be a good opportunity to get that work done as well.
I just know it's been on there for a couple of
Yes.
years, like, as far as their requests, and I haven't been to the track to even see, I just know that's something that was on the maintenance list that they've really been requesting.
Yeah, I think that's predominantly the soccer and lacrosse programs, because that'll give them the ability to run the huddle camera, I believe.
Okay.
for-
Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you.
And again, Sergeant Thomas and them, that's a lot of work that we've needed out there for a long time. We couldn't afford. Okay, so it's been properly moved and seconded. Any other questions? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
And Mr. Seymour, thank you for working with them.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next on the agenda is the maintenance work orders. Any questions on them?
I don't have any questions on this, but I do have a request for an item to be put on.
That's next, so it's good.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question first? Okay, now,
Mr. Martin, the lights going around the vocational center, coming up to all those levy meetings at dark, only 2 lights on the side of the vocational school work at the stop sign, like the ROTC has her in that crosswalk that goes
Okay.
over. Otherwise, all the lights back by the garage doors and coming around the corner, almost to, I guess, the food services, none of those lights are working at night.
Okay.
To mine.
Could be a timer issue. Well, now, I'll tell you, I was up here late the other night, and I know the ones outside of the automotive garages were all working. It could be an issue with the time change. The timers need to be adjusted, but I'll definitely check on that.
Yeah, it was definitely when we left the levy meeting, so it probably been around 7 o'clock. It was dark. I'll just put it that way. It was really
Well, and
dark.
I think that's the problem. We need to crank those timers up, because they do come on, because I was up here later than that, and they were on, but
Okay.
I'll check to be sure we don't have anything out over there, though, as well, and we'll get those timers adjusted.
All right, thank you.
yeah, the timers, sometimes you forget to change.
Can those just be changed out to dusk to dawn sensors? Like a central one?
Possible. I don't know. Like I said, they're kind of an old style, almost like, there's like a dial.
It's a
on it
dial.
that you have to, they're not hard, it's not hard to update, though. We'll just need to get somebody to check on that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
it's.
What's it getting dark right now?
I can do it, it's pretty simple. It's, that's because I used to have to adjust them. Anything else on the agenda, or to add for next meeting's agenda? Again, one thing, Mr. Martin, we did not get through everything on the work session. So, board members, we look, as nearly as I could tell, we were about halfway through. Do we need another work session yet? What's your feeling?
About elective,
I vote yes.
I vote yes.
And math resources.
Well, it's dealing with the math,
Yeah, I think, yeah.
because that was one part that we did not get through everything.
Mr. Huggins, would you want to try, like, when we have the next meeting here on site?
Yeah, I think so,
Okay.
because I think
Do
it's
that.
easier to get the teachers here. Sure. You know, the
Can we get
people-
more teachers here? I mean, how many math teachers do we have at the high school?
Let's say 8 or 9.
8.5?
Well, one, he teaches Cisco too.
Okay. I thought it was like the student, like 8.34. Be nice to have more teachers here. I mean,
Sure.
And then,
It's tough right now, like I said, with the coverages over there, but
Now that's just straight math, but then we have special ed teachers as well that teach math, resources, so.
what we may be able to do, though, is see if their collabs could cover those classes temporarily while they come over, because, we may want to add a little bit of time, because an hour is pretty tight.
I was gonna say, I think,
Hour
yeah,
and
at
50.
least
We need about
2
another
hours.
50, we need
I don't
another,
think we're halfway.
we need another 15,
Well,
20 minutes at
It was
least.
about halfway.
Yeah.
And Mr.
we gotta do
Bone, Mr. Bone had gone to the auctioneering school, and
We were
did.
halfway down the list, but not able to ask questions on the whole thing.
Correct.
So I'm saying, like, we may have made it through the list, but like, I could have added an hour of questions.
to the new year.
Yeah, that's why we left the list the way it was.
Colson, and for our presentation, I got my thing through in like speed round, but Colson also had a whole portion that he had to input as well.
And like I said, we're not forgetting that. That's why I wanted to make sure we
Sure.
were back.
We appreciate that.
Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, you're waiting until the next quarterly
Let me look here.
10 a.m. meeting?
He was just saying the next one here. I didn't think he said the next morning meeting, though. I thought he said the next
Well,
one.
it spoke
Well,
about,
I led on because.
Well,
that's
about
that's
getting
fine.
coverage for teachers, so I assumed it was.
And that's a good assumption.
I'd have to look at our meeting schedule, guys. I'll have to look at the schedule of meetings.
Because I
And if we
think
need
that's
to,
too long. I mean,
if we need to set a special meeting, we can as well.
Can we just
Yeah, like
open
Kristen
for
and I
discussion.
can present as well, like during the board meeting.
Yeah.
and can-
Well, the reason being is the next meeting we'll have a lot because we have.
Right, even
We
if
have 2 LSICs.
Right.
So those are a long meeting.
Right.
That's one, and I think we'll look at, Mr.
I think the first meeting in January is here and it's daytime.
Oh, okay.
And Mr.
I'm pretty
Martin
sure
can
it
look at
is.
that
I'll
and
have to
tell us
look.
next meeting.
All right, so now here's how else we get some.
Through the wintertime, they start alternating. We have a daytime meeting in November, and then we don't have, I believe our first meeting in January is also a daytime.
And December only has one.
That's what I thought, okay.
And that would give time, and maybe, Mr. Seymour, we could get with the teachers, since we know that's going to be ahead of time, and this time you probably didn't have as much notice.
We can run some polling and so forth with the teachers as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? But I do want to thank you too, because
Thank you,
that was a lot of work that you put in and brought to us. Anything else for the good of the order? Last thing, and I know Mr. Martin emphasized again, we thank our veterans and thank those schools for doing the Veterans Assembly. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know others as well. So with that, I'm going to entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham and second by Ms. Feathers. Any discussion? Hearing none. Call for the vote.
Call for that quick there, Mr. Huggins.
I did. I'm not giving this.
Before Mr. Kisner opened his mouth.
I'm going to let Mr. Kisser ask.
He has a reputation now, doesn't he?
I'm glad you're back, I'm glad you had a safe trip, Mr. Kisser. All kidding aside. Did I break that time?
Yep, motion passes 4-0 at 1:12.
And all of you that were here today, thank you.
Or is it
It's
1:13?
appreciated.